What made you nope the heck out of your date? I had an incredibly boring Friday in my internship once. It was 11 and I thought I was going to pass away of boredom, so I asked my best mate to come up with an emergency and call my supervisors for me. I didn't have a phone at my desk and I wasn't allowed to use my own phone. I asked him to call me on Facebook. And so 5 minutes later, my supervisor's phone rings. He picks up and says it's for me. I walk over to his desk and take the phone. This mate of mine has come up with a story that my mom was in the store and fainted, so he called her an ambulance. Not unbelievable. My mate did run a store, and my mom did go there every now and then, but to add an extra dimension to it, he was playing an ambulance siren over the store's music system. So I had to hold back my laughter while asking him if he knew what hospital they took her to. He knew they couldn't hear him, so he answered that due to her size, they decided to take her to SeaWorld and ask the whale doctor for advice. I'm picturing a supervisor trying to explain that emergency to HR. Yeah, so the intern's mom, whale doctor, it's a long story. Story 2. He showed me pictures of his dog, who he affectionately named Fleaface. I told him to get him some Capstar ASAP and keep him on a flea preventative in the future, and he said he couldn't afford flea meds for his dog or his cat, who was in similar condition. He then proceeded to tell me how excited he was about his brand spanking new Xbox. How can you buy an Xbox instead of taking basic care of your dog? He's apparently in a relationship now, and he posted a picture of his cat who looks much healthier. Maybe I got through to him? Story 3. I met this guy on Tinder. A few days before the date, he asked me to meet up, and I told him no because I was working on a project, so let's meet up in a couple days instead. He told me on the date a few days later that on the day we had that conversation, he had sat outside the library for 5 hours waiting for me to come out so he could see me or meet me for the first time. We had only been chatting for like a week. I left as soon as possible and never saw him again. I hadn't even been working in the library. I was at a friend's house. He just assumed I would be at the library. What the hell? The date happened after the creeping, and he told me on said date, unfortunately. Story 4. Date was going well. She brought up intimacy, talking about things she had done, wanted to do, and didn't want to try. I shared my interests, and we were very nicely compatible. As we got even more comfortable, she said she could totally understand why other girls would accuse a man if they willingly had intimacy with him, but felt guilty the next day. I asked her if she would ever do that. She honestly thought for a moment and said she could totally see herself doing that. I told her that I didn't think the date was working out and wish she'd end it early. She said the restaurant sucked, but we could hang at her place. I offered to pay for a cab. This upset her. I refused to leave the restaurant with her or give her a ride home. I stayed inside chatting with the waitress until my date's ride had picked her up and was out of the parking lot. Story 5. That guy from online. He immediately tells me he lied about his age and then went on to rant about how women are so judgmental, so he has to lie just to get his foot in the door, so to speak. Thing is, he lied to make himself like 4 years younger. I definitely wouldn't have picked up on it without him telling me. It seemed to me he was maybe a bit insecure about being over 30 now. I suggested maybe lying wasn't the best way to get in with someone as it doesn't make the best first impression. Cue another rant about how women are so hell-bent on first impressions. Therefore, shallow. Downed my coffee and noped out of there. Sent a text later saying thanks, but no thanks. Got a lovely long text about how I wasn't as pretty as my pictures and should lower my standards. Story 6. Homelessness. This one is still fresh. Met her on a dating site and she wanted to go out for drinks. That night. Okay, sure. I'm a bit tired, but I don't get a lot of dates and she seemed cute. Picked her up and she was kind of out of it, having trouble stringing a sentence together. Got to a local eatery. It was about 9:30 on a Tuesday, so pretty quiet. She gets her jacket off and there's marks all over her arms, so she obviously has some major emotional issues. She tells me how she just escaped a cruel situation in another city halfway across the country. She notes that she had a lot to drink before I picked her up, explaining why she can't converse. I note she's spending a lot of time on her phone, but as we're sitting beside each other at the bar counter, I can see she's looking up apartments and places to rent, kind of piecing things together at this point. We finish dinner and head out. I'm not going to just kick to the curb. I do have a heart, so I just say, I'll drive you home. And she goes, I don't live at that place you picked me up from. I was just getting some grass from them. Okay, where do you want me to drop you off? Her. I don't know. I don't really have a place to go. I guess a shelter, but they're all full up. She wants to grab a smoke, so I buy her a pack at the 7-Eleven and a lighter. Figure she'll smoke outside, but nope. She lights that up in my 3-week-old smoke-free car. I'm definitely not going to say to stop it. Otherwise, this unstable girl might put it down on my leather seats. Quickly roll down all the windows and start driving. She notes that she can't get a job without ID and can't get ID without an address, which she can't get an address without money for rent. Classic catch-22. After 20 minutes of her texting, she finds a place where she can stay the night, so I drop her off. Next day, she texts me, I guess wanting a second date. I called a couple friends who may be able to find her a job and temporary accommodations. Money and an address. Perfect. I do some research for homeless or addressless people and how they can get an ID to get a job. The government here has some programs especially for this kind of case. She's not a stupid person, so I figure with a bit of help she can get back on her feet. I give her the number of my friend and some links or numbers to some of these resources. With a bit of effort, she should be able to at least get him a job, and maybe a lot more in a bit of time. Instead, she flips out on me, saying I'm treating her like a 5-year-old. She messaged me again a few times, but I just ignored it. Not dealing with that. Story 7. It was my 19th birthday. Cat had been sick for a week, slowly getting better. Woke up, Kitty had passed. Can't cry now, though. I've got a date to get birthday cupcakes for this girl I matched with on Tinder. To my knowledge, she would have graduated in a couple months and was 18, so that's neat. We got horrendously lost on the way there. Stopped at some ice cream place, wound up paying for hers because I was lonely and hoped it would make a good first impression. She says she'll pay me back after she gets money from her job, literally doing the finger air quotes. I asked why the sudden mysteriousness. She explains she sleeps with people for some cash. Explained she couldn't hang with me the weekend prior because she was staying at this 30-something-year-old married guy's house for a couple nights. Immediately drove her home and then drove home and just kind of sat there wondering what on earth had all just happened. I bet the cat was looking down like, dude, I passed away for this? Story 8. I'm a software developer. He started talking about how men are inherently more suited to quantitative work because of some garbage logic regarding how they had to be smarter or more analytical in order to hunt more efficiently or something. Then heavily implied that it must be a diversity hire for my company, and went on a rant about how affirmative action has made white men an underprivileged class. For some unknown reason, I finished out the date, but immediately after leaving, I sent him a text saying that his attitude disgusted me and to never contact me again. He responded saying that he couldn't possibly be prejudiced because, no joke, he reads the Washington Post. I blocked him after that. Story 9. My worst date ever started with him being 30 minutes late. I sat down for coffee, drank mine, and was walking out the door when he bumped into me in the street. I was too passive to tell him he was too late, so I went and ordered another coffee. He ordered the biggest freaking frappuccino thing in the menu, then made a cursory part of pockets and said he forgot his wallet. Dude, you're going on a date. I'm a modern woman and I always offer to go Dutch, but at least pretend that you were going to pay for your $7 milkshake. So we get our drinks and walk around. He points out a building and says, "Did you know there's a club in there?" At that point, I was done. He was the trashiest person I'd ever met. Told him I was leaving and not to call me and hopped on the bus. Story 10. Showed up for my day with Ashley, who had been chatting with back and forth online. This was 10 years ago. Sat down at the bar. Someone comes and sits down next to me and says, "Hi, I'm Ashley." Looked at a photo of what I assumed was Ashley and her ex-boyfriend and realized the person sitting across from me was the ex-boyfriend in the photo. And that is how, as a straight man, I showed up for a date with a man. After I somehow politely told the guy he was misleading and that he knew I thought she was the girl in picture and what he was doing was deceitful and a good way to get his back kicked, he had the gall to respond that, "It's okay. We can go after chicks together, and if we strike out, we can both still have a good time." That is when I told him to go screw himself and left. Story 11. Not a terrible one, but had someone rather insistent on us going out when we were both broke. Persistent bugger. I caved. He drove me from my place on the south side of town to a banquet bar in a suburb 35 minutes north that had seating for 408 people in the joint, including the bartender. He wanted us to order one cocktail and split it between the two of us. Then when the bartender went to the back, my date excused himself to the restroom. I saw him stop the bartender across the empty hall and they talked for a minute. Yeah, this dude was asking this random bartender to comp our tab because apparently he had banked on a former work acquaintance of his being A, there, and B, willing to give this near stranger a discount for name dropping. The bartender clearly felt bad for me, and while I don't know what my date ended up paying, since he awkwardly wrestled the tab away from me, I can only assume it was this guy's last few dollars and no tip. Date then hung out smoking with the bartender for a while and ordering a few rounds of tap water, clearly in the hopes of the guy liking him enough to give us something on the house. After we finally left and I convinced him to just take me home, he insisted on stopping at a burrito place and used a different card to buy a loaded burrito for himself. Said he didn't want to eat alone inside or make me sit in the restaurant while he ate, but he also didn't want to let the burrito get weird while he dropped me off. So he ate it in the parking lot while I sat there and waited. Story 12. I met up with him and he was not at all like his pictures on POF. He was a tiny man with greasy slick back hair. After the date, I was going to leave and he told me he wanted to tell me something. Hindsight is 20/20, but I should have noped out of there that second. But I was young and stayed. His first sentence, I have a really small Johnson. He then proceeded to tell me he wanted me to be his girlfriend and that he only wanted to have intimacy with me one time, where I would tell him afterwards of all the terrible things he did in bed. He also stated I would be allowed one friends with benefits, but the friends with benefits had to have a massive one. After having intimacy with the hypothetical friends with benefits, I would drive straight over to this guy's house. Now, I don't judge people's fantasy, but he continued to say how his last girlfriend did this and that he would go over to her house when she was having intimacy with the friends with benefits and watch them through the window. A peeping Tom confession was not how I planned the date to go. I just smiled and slowly left. Story 13. I love OkCupid. One of my first online dates, very pretty, funny, likes baseball, and really knows her crap. Go for a walk in the park and had a good time. How about dinner? Okay. Service is bad. I worked in retail most of my life, so, I get it. The waitress had a huge section. Not a huge deal. We'll leave the restaurant and my date drops the N-bomb to me while complaining about the service. Suggested our black waitress ignored us because we were white. See you later. Date over instantly. Not sure how that one filtered through. Usually OKC was normally good at filtering out the prejudice based on the questions. Really great first couple of dates. We go exclusive, very cute, fun, likes the same crap as I do, down for virtually everything. Tells me she has leukemia. Asks if I'll stay. This is like a month and a half into the relationship. Well, crap, I really dig this girl, but we just met. I tell her it is a lot to think about. I get a text from a number I don't recognize. Turns out it is a friend of this girl. She asks if she can call me. Well, okay. I talk to this friend, and it turns out the leukemia is BS. It is a test she pulls on guys and has done it like 4 or 5 times already. I guess she has a lot of mental issues and stopped going to therapy. I feel really bad, especially because I think other than this, the girl is amazing, but I had to split with her. I also had a first date on New Year's Day and ended up at Kmart, and it ruled. My final OKC date involved a girl basically bolting on me because she wanted to get ice cream with her roommates. I felt kind of slighted, but we're getting married in a month, so I guess it turned out okay. Story 14. I wish it was an exciting story, but I had a date for Valentine's Day, and she invited me over to her house and told me to bring snacks. I was down to just chill, eat some snacks, and chat. I bought some cookies and headed over, and as I'm at the elevator, she texts me and says, "If you're a catfish, I'm closing the door on you." And I took it lightheartedly and just ha-ha'd it off. Went up the elevator, and she was at the top, and she was a freaking catfish. She also had a messy apartment. Wouldn't even look at me the entire time, and she just watched Grey's Anatomy for the 30 seconds I was there, and she one-worded me the whole time before I just said, "Well, you can keep the snacks. I'm heading out. Nice meeting you." She texted me soon after, apologizing and offered to take me out and told me she just had really bad Tinder experiences in the past. Not my problem. Respectfully declined and moved on. The snacks were the real victims here, left alone in that messy apartment, destined for a sad, uneaten fate. Story 15. Honestly, not that exciting, but I walked out of a Tinder date at a local dive once without saying a word, like completely bailed. We met there and she was at a table texting when I walked up. She greeted me and immediately went back to texting, informing me, "Sorry, I just have to respond to an important message real quick." It's a pet peeve of mine and I consider it pretty rude to text during a date, but whatever. There are exceptions. I go get my drink, come back, still texting. I sit down, start working on my drink. Still texting. After about 3 minutes, and me clearly seeing the thumb only moving up scrolling that is synonymous with Twitter or Reddit or entertainment apps, I ask if she's done. She says to give her just 1 more minute. Over the course of the next 5 minutes, I finish my drink. Still on her phone. I say, "I'm going to go get another drink." And she grunts an acknowledgement without looking up from her phone. I get up to the bar and just think, I don't want to sit and have another drink while she messes around on her phone. I'm not having fun. So I closed my tab, turned on my heels, and just walked out. It took her about another 20 minutes to notice, and I finally got to hear from her when she sent me a very irate text message. I blocked the number and just went home. Story 16. In college, a buddy worked at an Italian restaurant and set me up with one of the waitresses. She was cute, funny, and smart. Then she asked if I'd drive her to a dealer's house across town. At first, I thought she was joking, but then she said, "He usually goes to bed around 11, so we gotta hurry." He gave me his address to put into my phone. I told her I wasn't comfortable taking her to buy substance and that I was just gonna go home. She got mad and said I was being crappy. I went home and immediately blocked her number. My buddy said she got fired a few weeks later for showing up intoxicated. Classy. Story 17. We were in a restaurant. Now I had good education at home, so I always treat customer service people politely. Saying please and thank you, try my best to understand their side of the story and be patient with them. So this girl I'm with is quite the opposite. She acts like she's a tyrant queen and the waiters are her servants or something, and then we barely ordered something to drink and she asks me, "Why do you say please and thank you to the waiter? He's doing his job and being paid for it, you know? You shouldn't say this because it's not a favor." Okay, that's really bad, but I'll give you just one more chance. Then I put my phone on the table, face down. She pulls hers and asks me why I did do that, and I said, "Well, I thought about this little game. We put our phones on the table on top of each other, face down, and enjoy our time here on our date. The first one to pick up the phone before the check pays for our drinks." And she just said, "Now that's a stupid game. What would I do while we wait for the food?" Well, I don't know, lady. How about we talk to each other? As soon as the drinks came while she was on the phone, I discreetly asked for the check, gave the waiter some cash for the drink, told him to keep the change, and told her I was going to the bathroom. I don't even think she noticed, though. On the other hand, my 10-year-old little brother was a really nice company back home. Story 18. Years ago, I was on a dating site. A free one, as I wasn't quite desperate enough to pay for a dating service. Most matches went fairly well. Some ending in fooling around, some ending with some decent friends. This particular one didn't. I saw her profile, read her bio, and thought, yeah, she looks decent and is relatively interesting. Let's give it a shot. We messaged back and forth a bit, eventually exchanged phone numbers and decided to meet up for a date. After driving for an hour, I arrived at her place, and what I assumed was her sister came out to meet me. This couldn't be her, right? The lady in the pictures wasn't perfectly octagonal, nor did she have a smile that could cut keys. I was wrong. So I suggest hitting a bar first. She agrees and proceeds to hold the next several conversations by herself. Not for my lack of effort, mind you. I just couldn't get a word in. Well, now I was stuck with her for a bit. Trying to be nice, have a few drinks, enough to loosen me up a bit. We walked to the theater and grabbed tickets for the movie and get seated to watch. Never a moment of silence. At this point, I was hearing her life stories. About how she'd never had a long-term boyfriend and how most guys just take her out once and leave. The movie starts and I realize it's just us. So does she. Failed to warn her when it finished and she promptly went back to talking. The date ended with me taking her back to her house for what she expected to be intimacy. She left the car and I left the driveway, ignoring the notifications on my phone the whole hour back. If you're enjoying the video, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos like this. Story 19. This was way before the Tinder days, circa 2001. And my friend set me up with her then-boyfriend's sister. We go clubbing and my date just starts chugging drinks. She proceeds to tell me she just got off the street after a 4-month stint. She tries to make out with me all night, but I'm dodging her face like a rich kid during a war draft. On her way home, she can barely keep herself up and ends up opening the car door, not the window, while the car is in motion so she can stick her head out and retch. Before the date, I was really hoping I would lose my V-card that night, but she was just so full of nope. Story 20. We were hanging out at her place, watching The Accountant while drinking a few beers. I'm not intoxicated, but definitely start to feel buzzed. I asked her if I could have the dime tour of her place, which she enthusiastically obliged. Her place is tiny, so with no time at all, we find ourselves standing together in her walk-in closet. I start kissing her and know that we're going to do it. The first problem was I didn't have any rubber. I tell her that in hopes that she will talk some sense into me. Nope. She tells me that she has an IUD. I tell her she has a nice place with great decorations, if only to make idle conversation. She starts sobbing uncontrollably and tells me that most of the accoutrements are from her wedding, which ended up in divorce just a few months before. I start to think I made a mistake. But rather than just get dressed and bail, I offer that we take a walk. I get dressed and she leashes up her dog and we start walking around the block. She starts tugging on the leash and is clearly hurting her young 30-pound dog. I offered to walk him, which she flatly refused, saying, "He's my damn dog. I'll walk him." We walk in silence for a moment, then she says, "You know, normally guys just up and leave right after we do it. You're the first one that stuck around." When we got back to her place, I saluted her goodbye and never looked back. Story 21. 3.5 years later, and I still kick myself for not noping out earlier. The whole thing was so bizarre. Still remember it like it was yesterday. Online dating. He lived about 25 miles away. I suggested an area about halfway between us where we could meet up. He proceeded to pick a Texas roadhouse in his neighborhood. So I was already coming into it a bit annoyed. I also let him know that since it was a weeknight, I wasn't able to stay very long. When he arrived, he was noticeably heavier than in his photo. This isn't necessarily a deal breaker to me, but there was just no intellectual attraction or connection there either. I managed to get out after an hour or so, but not before he whined that I wouldn't go bowling with him. Because, I have a job, and kissed me as we left. I texted him upon getting home that night that while it was a nice time, I didn't think we were a romantic match. Again, he got all whiny and insistent that we'd be friends. I wasn't interested. But over the next several days, he texted me at odd times. Middle of the night that he was thinking about me, and invited me to all these state-like activities. I gave minimal, non-committal answers, said it wasn't available, ignored the late-night stuff, etc., hoping he'd get the picture, but eventually had to lay it out that I didn't want to give him the wrong idea and that it was best we didn't talk anymore. He then got super upset, inferred that the issue was his weight, told me he had some sort of thyroid problem but swore he'd lose it all for me, and told him it wasn't his weight, that I wasn't interested. Wished him the best and blocked him on my phone. Thought it was over until 2 full months later. I was literally halfway across the country as a bridesmaid in a friend's wedding. I wake up the morning of the wedding, check my dating profile, and there's a message from Crazy telling me that he lost 30 pounds. For me. And any chance for a second chance? At that point, I was tired of beating around the bush and playing nice. I told him, as I had told him multiple times before, that it was not his weight that was the issue, that I was not interested, and I would be reporting him if he contacted me again. All that from a 1-hour date. Story 22. This was about 10 years ago. I showed up to meet this girl I had met on Lava Life. Agreed to meet at an Indian restaurant she wanted to go to. I got there and she was doing a monster line, right in front of everyone in the middle of a crowded restaurant, like it was nothing. I saw that, just turned around and walked away. It turned out she was a local radio personality and went off about it on air that I stood her up and called me out by name. I had a friend call me and tell me what was going on. So I phoned in and live on air, I said, I saw you chugging a line in the middle of the restaurant and just walked away. It was silence, then her partner started laughing and they hung up on me. Story 23. Repost, but whatever. I agreed to meet at her place for a pretty standard Netflix and chill date. I was in my mid-20s and she was in her early 30s with one child, a gorgeous, blue-eyed blonde. She let me in the front door and there was a man, probably around 40 years old, just sitting in the recliner. Her son was on the couch and they were both watching TV. She grabbed my hands and took me down to the basement. I was instantly incredibly anxious, wondering what was going on. Turns out that was her husband, and she apparently just does whatever she wants. So we fooled around while her husband and son watched TV upstairs. She was being obnoxiously loud. The intimacy was great, but it was super awkward, especially leaving. I made eye contact with a guy on the way out. He looked completely defeated inside. I never went back. Story 24. I was messaging this guy on Tinder and we decided to meet up at a local bar. We said 7. It's 7:15 and he texted me saying he was on his way, but it's a half an hour walk for him. No context as to why he's running late either. I don't need intimate details, but give me something. It really felt like he just decided to wait and leave late. Well, I have nothing better to do, plus I'm drinking, so I stay. He shows up, someone shows up, as it is not the guy from his pictures by a long shot. Like he's not the same race as the guy in the picture. His actual race was not the issue, would have still swiped right, but the surprise of a different person than the one I expected. I don't recognize him. He comes up and starts talking to me and looks baffled when I was shocked. Rather than outright accuse him, I say something to the effect of, Tinder must have glitched. I don't recognize you from the pictures I saw. So he gets out of Tinder and shows me that he is, in fact, in every picture. However, he's in the background or off to the side of every picture, and his friend is literally front and center. Like all of the visual language of the pictures point to his friend. We talk briefly, I make up some reason to leave. That's the end of it. I look over the pictures again and yeah, it definitely looks like he's trying to convince people he's his friend. But it gets better. About a year later, one of my friends is sharing her dating misadventures and she has a story that's eerily similar, as do 2 of her friends. They had all confirmed it was the same guy, and she and I were able to confirm it as well. I guess this is a thing that he does regularly. Story 25. Hell date. B-52's concert is our first date. However, he had just broken up with his ex and they loved the B-52s. I was sitting in the front row, blah, blah, blah. He drove. We were in the front row. We started drinking and partying. I figure out pretty quickly that this guy is trying to go into a cosmic coma, so I stop smoking it all and fake drink my drink. After the concert, he's intoxicated. Won't let me drive. He drives way too fast in the freeways. He got me back to my car and I got the heck away from him. I called the next day, wondering about a second date. Story 26. I've got a few. First, so we've been talking for a few weeks. She seems very normal and nice. She's finally free to meet. So we turn up at this bar, get some drinks, conversation's going really smooth. She seems lovely. And I tell a dictator joke. She looks shocked and replies, I think he was one of the best leaders ever. A genuine role model. I laughed, thinking she was joking. She wasn't. I got up, walked out, never looked back. Second, another girl. 2 weeks of talking away. Things are going great, so we arrange a date. This one lasted 6 hours and was amazing. She missed the last bus that went to where her car was parked, so I offered to drive her. 5 minutes in and she goes, "Don't take this the wrong way, but Are you gay? Are you in the closet? It's okay if you are. I consider myself very much straight, so I was a little offended. Not sure where that day went wrong, but as soon as she was at her car, I drove off. The third and final. This happened literally last week. Turned up for the date, sat down, and the first thing she said to me was, "You have piercings? Are you male? That's honestly disgusting." Again, hoped it was just a bad joke, but she was very serious. So I got up and walked. My pictures on everything dating-wise quite clearly show I have piercings in at least one of them. Story 27. Posted this before, but the stories are entertaining, so why not? Let's go again. Number 1 was set up for a date with a friend's friend. I'd seen her around at parties. She was pretty attractive, but I'd never really talked about it. My friend had mentioned that she was out in the dating scene, and so was I, so we got set up for a date. We went to have dinner somewhere, even though I don't like to go for dinners on first dates. I want the option to leave after one drink if needed. Anyway, we meet in front of the restaurant and go in. Before we sat down, she had already complained about the interior, the bartender's appearance, and the literal table we were about to sit down at itself. Then she decides that the food can't possibly be good, even though she hasn't looked at the menu yet. We order some drinks while I try to figure out if the girl is just having a bad day or is just a negative schmuck. We order food halfway through the drinks, and I try my best to steer the conversation into anything positive, but she just keeps being negative about anything we talk about. About 15 minutes after ordering food, I've had enough, and I tell her straight up that the date is over. Also tell her that I really want the steak I ordered. She makes a scene and leaves. Waiter comes over and asks if I want to cancel the food. I tell him I'll still have my steak, and if the cook has started on the burger, I'll have it to go. Steak was awesome. Burger was lunch the next day, and the friend who set us up was livid. Number 2, Tinder date. Matched with a girl with pink hair, which looked pretty good on her. We talked for a few days and decided to go grab a beer. I'm a little early at the bar we agreed to meet at, so I'm already sitting at the bar. Almost finished my pint when in comes Miss Pink. She looks about 50 kg larger than she made herself out to look in her pictures, and I'm simply not attracted to large women. I'm just not. But whatever, we're in a bar, it's Thursday night. She and I like beer, so at least we can have some beers and some laughs. But I highly doubt anything more would happen. I order 2 pints from the barman and I observe her. Not only is her hair pink, but also her coat, her leggings. Leggings are not pants, my dear. And her shoes are pink. When she comes up to me, we exchange pleasantries and I start off the conversation with, "You really like pink, don't you?" In a positive way. She, between catching her breath, asks me, "Did you just," inhales, "assume that I," inhales, "like pink?" In an offended, angry tone. I turn to the barman, ask him to forget about the pints, down the remainder of my current pint, put some money in the bar, and tell her goodbye. Date's over. Story 28. She was extremely rude to the waitress. I watched the poor woman walk away wiping tears. It was a busy night and she was slammed. My date would not get the heck off her phone. So here's what I did. I downed my beer, they didn't notice, and excused myself to the restroom. I walked to the wait station where a server was putting in an order. I said, "Tay, I'm really sorry, my date is such a piece of garbage." I know the check was about $50, so I pulled out $120. I handed it to her and said, "Keep the change from the 100. I only ask that you call her a cab with that 20. So the manager was standing a few feet away and she must have known what happened because she started giggling maniacally. The waitress gave me a hug and I told her I hoped her night got better, and then I dipped. I've taken a couple dates to that place since, and they always remember me and treat me very, very well. Never heard what happened to the girl I walked out on because, well, I just don't give a crap. Story 29. For context, I'm a guy that changes hair and beard length a lot. I like to let them grow, but I also may just go get my hair cut or shave my beard on whims. Since I change it so often, I did a pics of me with long and short hair and long, short beard, as well as clean shaven in a few different combinations of my dating profile. This one time I went on a date with a guy that said before the date I looked much better with short hair and clean shaven. And I was like, cool, my hair is longer now, and I pointed out a more recent photo. I then mentioned I was thinking maybe I would get it cut soon, but wasn't sure. He apparently interpreted that as I would most certainly show up for the date the way he preferred, and kept saying that I looked better with short hair and how he didn't like beards, and even went so far as to say I looked like a beggar, and suggesting I went to a barbershop and get it cut before we continued the date. I didn't leave for some reason. Guess I just didn't have the to react, but yeah, I didn't cut my hair and didn't see him again either. Story 30. I met a guy at an airport bar during a flight delay. We were having a great time, so he asked for my number and called me later to go on a date. The date. Dinner was so-so. Not really as much fun as the first time we had met, but not bad. He asked me if I'd like a drink at his place, and I agreed. We lived on opposite sides of town, about a 45-minute drive, so we met at the dinner spot and I followed him to his house in my car. We've met once, and I'm seeing his place for the first time, and he's now walking around his home, showing me where I can set up my laptop for work, where my things will go, and how the lighting in the bathroom is great for when I put on my makeup. I felt certain I was going to end up in the basement rubbing the lotion on, so I all but ran out of there and never answered his calls or texts again. So he emailed me to say I was psychotic and needed help. Story 31. When I was 17, I was newly single and working at a grocery store. I've been talking to this girl, Val, who was 18. We talked on and off, but it was obvious we were both interested in each other, though nothing serious. One shift, Val was assigned as my bagger. There was a lot of flirty teasing throughout. Halfway through, she invited me back to her place after work. Everything was coming up right-ro. I knew what was bound to happen later that night. As a young dude, recently single, I was looking forward to just having some fun. But then a shopping cart runner called off. Not really thinking, I volunteered to run the carts until the next guy could come in. I was winter and I was into Chuck Taylor's. Not very good water-resistant shoes. I drive Val home after the shift and we start watching some movie. We start making out and things start to escalate. All of a sudden she pauses. "Do you smell that?" She sniffs around and realizes it's my wet, soggy socks. That was her deal breaker. I don't blame her. We finished the movie and I went home. We fell out of touch after that night. Moral of the story, invest in good winter boots. Story 32. I'm way late to this thread, so I'm not sure if it'll get seen, but I was meeting a girl for the first time online. We met near a farmer's market, so we spent a little bit of time wandering around looking and buying some fresh fruit and vegetables for ourselves. Then we went off to get some lunch. We sit down in the restaurant, and as the waitress leaves with our drink orders, her eyes well up and she leaves for the washroom in a hurry, tears streaming down her face. She came back a few minutes later and asked what's wrong. "You're just not the kind of guy I usually date." Ouch. Did I know about then? Nah, that'd be the smart thing to do. I made it all the way up to the point where she started talking about her ex-boyfriends and how this one was a bodybuilder and this one plays on the city's football team and oh my god, he had the biggest thing. Yeah. I know I'm not the best looking guy and I'm probably average in the size department, so listening to that was super emasculating. I told her straight up that it's probably not cool to talk about that because I'm very obviously not like these other guys, and she was like, No, I didn't mean it like that." "How did you mean it then? Really?" Bonus stories. The next 2 dates after that were with a woman whose pictures did not match the person at all. They were of her, but old and probably hundreds of pounds lighter. When I met her, she also conventionally let me know that she'd just been to the doctor and was diagnosed with strep throat, but she hadn't gotten her antibiotics yet. I discreetly texted my sister and asked her to phone me, pretended there was a work emergency and I had to go and went to leave. I wanted a kiss before I left, with strep throat. No thanks. The woman after that laughed at a joke of mine and immediately stopped me hard across the face. I guess it was supposed to be one of those, ha-ha, gentle tap things, but she accidentally full-on slapped me. I ended the date and told her that it wasn't going to work out. She found as much online presence of me as she could and hounded me to see her again for well over a month. Great times. What is the worst thing you've ever seen someone do to their significant other in public? Be a complete tool. It was 8 p.m. and he had sunglasses on inside, lowering his head to peer over them at people. He was in full Ed Hardy gear and was gripping the shoulder of the girl next to him aggressively. She was chatting away excitedly about the food she was going to order. He rolled his eyes at her and didn't listen to a word she had to say. She seemed nice enough, bubbly and friendly and had a hot body, thin, naturally tan, toned with massive melons. They approach the counter and she brightens up as she orders her meal, fries with cheese and gravy. The guy next to her makes a noise of disgust and says loudly, "I can't believe you're eating this crap. You're going to end up like her." He nods behind them, to me. I narrowed my eyes at him as she went on to say she'll have a cola. The guy holds up his hand to her face and goes, "She'll have a water." Now he could just be looking out for her well-being, but people should always be allowed to make their own decisions. A significant other does not make it for them. I was livid at this point. Not only had he insulted me, but he'd also completely shut down his own girlfriend. Controlling schmucks don't deserve to be in relationships. Those are the kind of guys that buy into the alpha male BS. Story 2. I was at a LAN party that my friend was hosting, and there were about 10 of us there. One of our friends brought his girlfriend, but wouldn't let her play with us. We kept feeling awful, so I just ended up giving her my controller and letting her play. He goes crazy, smacks the controller out of her hand and tells her to stop bothering us. She tears up and tries to leave, but he talks her into staying. I have no idea why he wants her there, to just sit around and do nothing. He later on tries to pull down her top and feel her up in front of all of us. I ended up driving her home and she broke up with him. We didn't talk to him for like 4 months after that. Why only 4 months? Why not ever? That behavior was worth cutting ties over. Story 3. I have a similar story to LAN parties. We were all hanging out at my friend's house, and some of them started a game of League of Legends. The others, including myself, were playing Catan when suddenly I heard a, "What the heck?" His girlfriend, who was a total LOL freak, was up in her seat and smashing the crap out of the keyboard over and over on the desk. She was clearly freaking out, and the string expletives were nonstop. "You piece of crap! Are you freaking serious? What the heck did you just do? My God, you freaking suck! Why do you always have to carry the team? How the heck did we lose? You're cut! Cut! Do you understand?" The look on his face was one of shame and shock, and he just quietly got up and exited the room. The girl wasn't even shameful and continued her tirade on how she hated noobs and how she owned in LOL. Wow. Crazy. Story 4. After having LASIK eye surgery to correct an issue with my eyesight the other day, I went with my diabetic sister to a restaurant for a quick bite. She always tries to cheat and will overload in sugar if allowed, and this time was like no other. Behind us was a fat stump of a woman breathing loudly through her mouth and furiously typing into some application on her iPhone called Alien Blue, while I tried to adjust my new prescription glasses to view the menu and simultaneously ensure my sister's safety. Luckily, I caught my sister at the last moment before she was able to order a sugary drink that would have put her in a coma. I don't want her to end up like our poor mother who's now blind and living in a nearby hospital, which I tried to make my sister realize by motioning in the direction of her home. Anyways, we had a delightful dinner, but the blogger behind us took pictures the whole time we ate. I couldn't confront her as I could barely see. I hope she wasn't having some sort of medical meltdown behind us. Story 5. 2 teenagers were getting off the bus with their 3-year-old daughter. The guy kept calling the girl a screwed-up witch and kept raising his hands at her like he was going to slap her while she was holding the little girl. She kept begging him to visit his daughter, and he kept shaking his head and walked away. "That ain't my baby." The mother, still holding the little girl, followed him, and he nearly pushed them both into traffic. They were arguing in the curb, but the mother caught her balance. He crossed the street, she followed, and he tried to push her into traffic again. Story 6. I was visiting family up in Ohio when I walked out of a store and saw an arguing couple in the walkway. At this point, she was crying, and he was calling her every name in the book. My mind was already boiling because anybody who has the audacity to do that in public is most likely worse in private. But it was just one of those things you had to walk away from. That's when he hit her. I heard a loud slap as he told her to shut up and stop crying. After that, my sight went red. I'm sorry, but at no point is it okay to hit somebody who is not a threat to you or to those with the inability to defend themselves, especially if it is somebody significantly smaller than you. Without hesitation, I dropped my stuff, beeline to them, and the second our eyes met, I decked him in the face. He lost his balance for a second, and I took that opportunity to grab him by his clothes and throw him over the railing behind us. He flipped over it and hit the ground hard, and he just started sounding pathetic after that. The girl freaked out, but didn't fight me or yell at me or do anything to defend him, so I can be thankful for that. Hopefully that was enough of realization for her. After the initial rush, I told him something along the lines of never touching a girl again. That, unfortunately, was when I met his older brother. I guess he was in a car or something, but at this point I was walking away and he intercepted me. This guy had an easy 60 to 80 pounds on me, and he used it well, pushing me off my feet with one shove. I got back up and I started doing what I could, but eventually he nailed me in the neck and I almost blacked out, opening my eyes to see him sitting on top of me with my arms pinned to my sides. I wasn't very pretty by the end of it, but the cops were called at some point, so he eventually got off and bolted. Good times. That brother was an enabler. They both deserve bad things to happen to them. Story 7. Unfortunately, my dad was often a schmuck to my mother. Whenever she spoke, he would put her down. If she wanted to go out, she had to call him and ask for permission. Once when I was about 4, we went to a party. The room was very warm and my mother looked flushed with red cheeks. He thought she was wearing makeup, which she wasn't allowed to, and in front of all the guests, told her to wipe that freaking crap from her face. He dragged her to the bathroom and scrubbed her face, kept pointing to the completely white rag and insisting it was pink from the crud on her face. Those were bad memories. I think your dad needs to be institutionalized. Story 8. A few years ago, I was at a house party. There were about 30 people outside, some carelessly drinking while standing in the middle of the street. A loud argument between a couple caught my attention, and I looked in their direction just in time to witness the guy break a beer bottle. Everyone went silent. The guy, looking around nervously, took it upon himself to opine, "What's the problem, witch? You break bottles on each other all the time." I didn't know whether to laugh or get involved. Moments later, a few tap-out clad bros took it upon themselves to chase off the guy with threats of severe to make the whole ordeal worse. I went back outside later to have a smoke, and there was the girl, still soaked in beer, making out with a dude. I left in disgust. If anyone wants to know what a toxic relationship looks like, just show them the story. Story 9. Myself and my now ex-boyfriend of a year were driving to a hockey game in his hometown. We just moved there and I had no idea where I was going. He'd never actually been to the venue himself, so we're driving somewhat aimlessly downtown trying to find it. The entire time he's yelling and screaming at me because we're going to be late. Mind you, I am driving downtown in a new city, all because he doesn't have a driver's license at almost 30. We got to the venue at about 10 after the game started, and we had to park pretty far, seeing as we were so late. The whole walk to the venue, he's about 10 to 15 feet ahead of me, almost running and really angry. There were quite a few people just getting there, walking in the same direction as we were, and he turns around and screams at me to, "Hurry the heck up! I don't want to be late anymore thanks to you." I was so stunned and hurt and embarrassed. Everyone around us heard him, and some people even laughed. I was so mortified. I was so afraid to make him more angry that I sucked it up and went in with him. That guy was a total douche, and I have no clue why he stuck around as long as I did. Story 10. I was at a country music festival with my younger sister. This guy behind us appeared to be really intoxicated and was calling his very petite girlfriend a piece of crap. Ugly witch, every name you could think of. She just kept saying, "Okay, whatever," trying to get him to just chill out. I looked back several times and gave him the look, and it clearly wasn't working. Things escalated after about 30 minutes, and I looked back and he's pulling his arm back like he's going to hit her. I turned around and really loudly said, "Hey, cool it." He called me a witch and told me to mind my own freaking business. At this point, every male within 50 feet was quickly walking over to make sure I didn't get the crap beaten out of me. He left, and I offered his girlfriend my phone to call someone to come pick her up. Probably not the smartest decision I've ever made in regards to my own safety, but you better believe I wasn't going to watch this huge redneck beat the crap out of his tiny girlfriend. Story 11. I was on my way to my dad's house and stopped at a traffic light, and the SUV in front of me began rocking back and forth. I saw a fist fly from the passenger seat to the driver's seat. I exited my vehicle and approached the driver's side. In the driver's seat was a crying woman, but a huge welt in her face. There was a young kid in the back seat. "Ma'am, are you okay? Would you like me to call the police?" Through her tears and crying, she said, "No, I'm okay." Her significant other yelled at me to mind my own business, so I did. I went back to my car, just in time for the light to turn green. We were both in the right turn-only lane, so we both turned right. I gave the SUV some distance and followed, and we were going the same direction anyhow. In the middle of a 55 miles per hour zone, the SUV suddenly came to a complete stop. Apparently, the significant other had yanked the keys out of the ignition. The car started back up and sped off. I was still behind. I pulled into a gas station at the next major intersection. I pulled in and parked at the gas pumps, where they had parked against the building. Significant other jumps out of the passenger side, runs over to the driver's side, and literally rips this poor woman out of the car. Mind you, this is daytime, and there are 15 plus other cars at this very busy gas station. So I pulled my vehicle up and parked directly behind the SUV, cop style, at an angle, making it impossible for them to leave. At this point, I was on the phone with 911, and the sergeant I had been patched to informed me several squad cars were on the way. The man then approached me and threatened to kick my bum, etc. I responded by retrieving Mr. Glock 19 from the glove box, exiting the vehicle, and telling the guy to get on the ground and put his hands behind his head. He complied. The police arrived on scene about 60 seconds after I held him and took him into custody. I testified against him in court several weeks later, and he was sentenced to 2 years in state jail. Moral of the story, don't hit a woman. Ever. Especially not in front of me. Story 12. Let's see. My schmuck of an ex-husband used to verbally, and occasionally physically, mistreat me in front of my friends, out in public, pretty much wherever he felt like it. He and I went to the movies once with a friend of ours. We got into an argument and he proceeded to strand me at the movie theater, taking our friend in our car home. Luckily, we weren't too far from our apartment, so I simply walked home, but it was humiliating. Only once did our friends ever stop him from getting physical with me. During a Super Bowl party, he got mad at me for God knows what and started screaming at me. Then he grabbed my arm and started to drag me outside to discuss things further. Only then did one of our friends, who knew damn well what was going on, finally stepped in to say, "That's enough." My husband was angry beyond belief, but at least didn't actually harm me in front of people we knew. Years later, I'm now in an awesome relationship and thankful that I'm not still married to a monster. Story 13. Not quite something that I saw, but rather saw a result of. I study Scream at a local martial arts studio, which also teaches Taekwondo. During one of the kids' Taekwondo classes, the lead instructor took out some of those pads that looked sort of like castanets. Someone else probably knows what they're called. The reason they look like that is because when you hit one side, it collides with the other to make a loud smacking sound. Anyway, the instructor was talking to the class and hit the bag and noticed one of the little girls screamed, covered her rear, and started crying. Now imagine the glare of a man with 6 black belts, 2 of which are 7th degrees. This is the look the instructor gave this girl's apparently cruel parents. They never came back to the school. You should have done something about it. Story 14. I wasn't here, but this happened to one of my roommates. She just joined a sorority this past semester of school and was taking her on-again, off-again boyfriend to the spring formal. It was her birthday weekend, and she was really excited to have a nice and fun event to go to with him as they had been having problems prior to this and were just getting back to normal. She has an incredibly fit and athletic body and was wearing a really tight-fitting dress, so other guys at the formal were checking her out. Her boyfriend saw this and snapped on her for it within 10 minutes of being there. He started yelling at her in front of all her new sisters and friends for being a witch and about how he can't trust her, even though she did nothing to facilitate the being looked at wrong. He brought up all of her close guy friends whom she hung out with, but didn't actually do anything with when they were broken up. Not to mention the last time they broke up, he didn't actually tell her. She found out when she went over to see him and his roommates told her he was at a party trying to get with some random girls. She left that formal sobbing within the first half hour of being there, and her craphead boyfriend stayed all night to partake in the free sorority booze with his buddies. She took him back 3 days later. My God, know your worth, girl. Story 15. I won tickets to a water park through a radio show recently, and we went with 4 other couples, as well as the DJs. The show had hired a limo for the day, which naturally was stocked with alcohol. We hadn't even gotten into the highway before the alcohol was opened. Halfway there, it was about 1.5 hours to get there. The guy next to my wife was completely intoxicated and was talking to us about how he and his girlfriend liked to watch corn and tried the things they saw. His girlfriend, who was right next to him, was looking at us horrified, shaking her head and going, "Who are you with? That's not us." He just kept talking and ignored her. Story 16. I still think about this sometimes and feel horrible with myself for not saying anything. I was in line to check in for a flight, and there was a couple behind me with a child in a stroller who couldn't be much more than about a year old. The child's skin was tinted yellow, obviously jaundiced. Another person in line made a comment about how well-behaved the child was. The line was taking a really long time. The mom said that they were flying to some hospital to do an organ transplant. A few minutes later, I overheard the couple talking quietly amongst themselves, and the man started speaking to her in pretty harsh tones. Something about how she always talks too freaking much, and by the way, she forgot to pack something they needed, and she was so freaking stupid. I got a glimpse of her face as I glanced behind me, and it was painfully obvious that she was completely miserable in that relationship. I was toughing it out for her sick kid. Story 17. I was sitting in the car with my mom and dad, and my dad was having one of his rages while at the wheel and stopped at an intersection. After yelling and calling my mom every name in the book to the point where she had tears streaming down her face, he tried to force her out of the car. But she protests desperately and doesn't budge, so he says, "Screw you then. I'm walking home." He pulls the keys out of the ignition, gets out of the car, slams the door behind him, and starts walking the 40 kilometers to our house, leaving myself and my sobbing mom in the middle of a busy intersection with no keys to start the car and every nearby vehicle honking the horn and screaming at us. Did he get run over? Please tell me he got run over. Story 18. I had a friend or housemate whose girlfriend treated him like crap. He tried to break it off a few times, but she wouldn't let him. I was never clear on how that worked, but it probably involved their close families and mutual friends. I was neither. We were at a party at his house, and things were going well. She was being chatty and flirty with other guys, as she often did, but was just having a good time, talking to lots of people. At some point, they disappear from the party, and you start hearing shouting from his room. We don't know whether to intervene or not, but they both just shouting through a semi-closed door, so we kind of let them go. Basically, he's calling her out on her crap. She's going for petty insults. Then she sees there are people outside the door and immediately bursts into tears. Now he's a dude yelling at a crying woman. He realizes what's going on, smashes something of his against the wall. All attention is now on the situation. Ladies take the girl away downstairs. I try to talk my friend down. When I come downstairs, she's spreading a sob story, alluding that he might have hit her, etc. Basically trying to make him look like a monster for finally standing up to her. I realize this doesn't seem like much, but it came at the end of years of this crap, and I couldn't believe how a person could do that to someone they cared about. 2 of us, one lady and myself, took her and her friend or flatmate outside and I hailed a cab. We put them in it. I gave the cabbie a 20 and told him to take them home. She smiles and thanks me for being so caring. I leaned in through the open window and whispered that she's doomed to me, and if she ever sets foot in my house again, I'm calling the cops. The shocked face she made as the cabbie drove off wasn't satisfying at the time, but now that they've been broken up for years, it's a very fond memory. Story 19. I used to date a guy that would have these horrible anxiety attacks. Seriously, one of the nicest guys ever, but when he got wound up, he would bark orders of what he needed. It was really harmless and truly never aimed at me, but you tend to get a lot of people staring at you, and the guy you're with is gripping your forearm in a Best Buy and shouting, "I need to leave here now! I don't care if you come, but I'm leaving now!" Or you're sitting at a table and he's gruffly saying, "Can you get me some water? I need some water now!" People would always glare at him and think I was this weak woman staying with a cruel man, but honestly, his urgency was understandable once you watched him have a full attack. He would often pass out or retch and would finish his attack sobbing, which can really be humiliating in front of a large crowd of people. The harsh tone was entirely accidental, and he would usually grab my arm because he was dizzy and said I helped ground him. I only got a small bruise once from him grabbing me, but he proceeded to pass out and fall very hard and kind of yanked me down with him, and afterwards, he felt horribly guilty. The guy was great, but his panic attacks were stressful for me as well, and we wound up breaking up. But I always felt bad that he got grouped into this horrible schmuck category like the rest of those guys. If you're enjoying the video, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos like this. Story 20. Not sure if this will count. I recently moved into an apartment downtown, and our view out the window is looking down at a bar. I was watching some TV when I heard some pretty insane yelling. I get up and move toward the window where I see a group of about 10 guys arguing with one another. I'm watching and thinking that these guys are a second away from fighting. I get my phone out to maybe call the police to come and check it out, but it's too late. Several guys pair up and start fighting. Most of them aren't even landing anything and just moving around, but one guy, literally 6'4" and about 250 pounds, just lays this one guy out. He gets knocked unconscious, and I'm on the phone telling police where it's happening, but then the huge mother-freaking guy goes up to the kid he just knocked out and starts kicking his head into the cement. And this girl goes up to the guy who's curb-stomping her boyfriend and starts pulling on his shirt to make him stop. The guy turns around, pauses because he thinks it's probably another guy, and straight up punches his girlfriend, and now she's laid out onto the street too. I instantly ran downstairs and started to tend to the guy and the girl until the police and Gold Cross came. I'm an EMT and feature med student. The guy apparently tried to flee down the street, got in his car, and a good Samaritan who saw what happened from his vehicle parked behind him so he couldn't drive off. Talked to the police afterwards, and the most messed up thing was, after the guy did all that, and while I was running downstairs, he went up to another guy and bit the guy. Another person who needs to be institutionalized. Story 21. I worked in a water park for about a year. One day I began hearing reports on my radio about a family, couple and a young son, that were causing a scene by the locker rooms. Apparently the wife had lost the car keys, so the husband was now yelling at her and screaming at her in full public. She just stood there and took it with an embarrassed look on her face. The supervisor stood nearby in case things became physical. He was a big weightlifter, so he was our go-to guy in physical confrontations. I just wish there was something that we could have done. It was obviously an unhealthy relationship. Story 22. My ex's brother was a complete lunatic. He was dating a girl for years that he was physically and verbally cruel. I never understood why she stayed. All he did was take her money and use it on substances. She worked all the time just to support his habit while she lived in utter squalor. I remember one instance of his cruelty that came out of nowhere. We were all standing in the yard joking and hanging out when he walked up and knocked her. Then he proceeded to scream in her face all sorts of slanderous remarks while she laid there unconscious. My ex did nothing. I was scared to speak for fear that he would harm me, so I got up and walked into the house and called the cops. He went away for a while, but she remained with him till he left her for another user. So sad. Story 23. I first became aware a friend of mine was a cruel knob, and my wife and I were having dinner with his wife. I've known this guy since he was 18. He was fun, smart, and had a great sense of humor. When he got married in his 20s, he and his bride seemed like a happy couple until we started hanging around him more. His wife was always quiet with a small smile, and so we tried to include her in our circle because we wanted to get to know her better and so she wouldn't feel like an outsider. One night, we were out at a theme bar and they were serving drinks that were kind of exotic. His wife, who was normally very quiet, ordered one that had a glow stick in it, which made him raise an eyebrow. But he said, "I'll allow it." At some point, we're laughing and having a good time when she starts playing with the umbrella in her drink like it's a real parasol over her head, and then puts it in her hair. My friend started to change mood drastically. Then she did the unthinkable and took the glow stick and put it between her just to be silly. She wasn't being flirtatious, and the table atmosphere had been casual and silly. But my friend then crossed his arms, very slowly and purposefully, and glared at her. He stared her down but said nothing. She did the usual, "What?" thing, but quickly she started to break down. She got quiet, took the glow stick out, and then placed it on the table and stared at the table blankly. He kept glaring at her, and the longer he did it, the more shy and withdrawn she looked until she started to tremble and tried not to cry. Then he stopped and calmly looked at us and pretended like nothing had happened with a "so anyway" kind of attitude, like his wife had completely embarrassed him, and he put an end to that right away. She never spoke a word the rest of the night, and he ignored her. My wife and I were shocked and didn't know what to do. It was the first hint we had that he was very controlling and cruel, and as the months went on, it became rather obvious she was miserable and scared. Thankfully, that poor girl eventually left him, and her ex-husband is no longer a friend. Good riddance. Story 24. Some foreign friends and I, while studying in Japan, We're leaving a grocery store after buying crap loads of meat for our evening barbecue. In front of us, a Japanese couple was walking side by side, as couples often do, with him holding the grocery bags. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary until he screamed obscenities at her, pushed her down, threw the grocery bags at her, and stormed off in the opposite direction they seemed to have been headed. We helped her up and together her solid groceries and saw that she was already in tears and terribly shaken. We had to all but physically restrain our Texan friend from chasing the douche down to give him a piece of her mind. Story 25. My brother and I were invited to a party by a girl who had been after us since high school. Everyone there was trashy and had been drinking since 2 in the afternoon. It was pretty much married or living together couples. We tried to blend in and catch up on drinking a little, but it became obvious that we just weren't fitting in. Somehow the conversation turned to 2 of the girls discussing making out. So the husband and boyfriend told them if the girls made out for 5 minutes, they would each give the girls $100. So the girls go at it. This was freaking hot watching 2 20-something girls French kiss. At the 3-minute mark, they paused for a second to swallow, catch their breath of otherwise aggressive lip lock, then continue. The guys refused to pay up because they didn't do it for a complete 5 minutes. This starts an argument which gets more and more heated. The girls refuse to drop it. One couple gets into a heated debate where other stuff about her job and his truck get thrown into the mix. Their anger seemed to run its course, but it's tense. The couple sit near each other quietly for a few minutes. Then the guy just jumps up, grabs his girl by the hair, and attempts to haul her home. This prompts another guy to get in his face and tell him that this was not the way guys treat their women. They have a chest-to-chest stare down. At this point, my brother and I noped the crap out of there. My brother's friend told us that pretty much the same thing happened every Friday. After a few hours, someone would end up fighting someone. The guy that came to the defense of the other guy's girl had beaten his girl up more than once as well. They were confused as to why we left and the party was just getting good. Getting good? What do you mean? Story 26. I used to have a really bad weight problem. I weighed 334 pounds and was able to get down to 155. I'm 5'6", but naturally big-boned. I'm female. It was Christmas Eve, and I invited my then-boyfriend to my extended family's house to celebrate. There would be relatives there who hadn't seen me since my weight loss, so I was excited. I was wearing a pair of size 8 jeans and feeling pretty damn good. They were all oohing and eyeing over me, but my boyfriend just sat silently. Finally, my cousin says, "Patrick, doesn't she look great?" And he goes, she could lose another 30. I was mortified. This was the first time they had met him. Needless to say, we aren't together anymore. Story 27. I play in a non-competitive kickball league. We were playing this team full of married couples. One of the wives fumbled and dropped a ball that would have led to an easy out. She's laughing because, well, she was embarrassed and everyone else was laughing with her except her husband. He said loudly, "Why didn't you catch that? It was so easy. Stop laughing. It isn't funny. We're going to lose." He then noticed he was being a prick as his wife looked like she was tearing up a little. He then walked over and tried to kiss her and he got rejected. Serves him right. Story 28. I was going to a restaurant in Huntington Beach, California, on Main Street with my fiancé. When I was a kid, this place was cool to walk around and check out the surf or skate shops. We get to a restaurant, eat, proceed to leave, and as we walk to the car, I see this rather attractive young lady running across the street to a parking lot. She was chasing a guy, screaming, "Why you gotta talk crap, huh?" They exchange words and he takes a swing and misses. I stopped, phone in hand, authorities dialed in, just waiting to call. Then the lady's friend chases after them and breaks it up and all is well. Not even a block away, I see a bicycle flying 10 feet in the area and a huge intoxicated guy saying, "Get the heck out of here, you stupid witch." I just grabbed my fiance's hand and power walked us to the car to get the heck out of that crap hole. Every time I go to that crap hole of a main street, I think, you will never find a more wretched hive of scum and villainy. We must be cautious. Story 29. I once made the mistake of dating a guy who was the schmuck of all schmucks. The only reason he had me around was to support him in a grow-up. It forced me to quit working for a family business because a $1 raise every 6 months wasn't good enough for him. I got a job working for a canvassing company. I knew it was a total scam, so I quit after 2 days. The day I quit, I had met him at a bar where he had been drinking, on my dime, all night, so that I could try to get my debit card from him and leave, but it was obvious that he was totally trashed and extremely angry. Once I gave up the debit card, I tried to get away from him and back to his house first so I could get my valuables and go to my parents' house before he beat the crap out of me, but I had no such luck. He found me at the bus stop and started terrorizing me right there in front of probably 6 or 7 other people, calling me names, telling me I'm a worthless witch and that I deserve to pass away, and on and on. After standing there and trying to ignore him whilst trying to find a way to call the cops without him noticing, I eventually retorted and he spit in my face, slapped me, knocked my phone from my hand, breaking it. Some guys across the street noticed what happened and started to cross and do something about it. My ex took off his shirt, pulled a knife, and made them walk away. He proceeded to yell at me more and say, "I saw you looking at them. You wanted those guys to come over and beat me up and then do you, didn't you? You don't care about me at all, you worthless witch. Blah, blah." Then he ran off for literally no reason I could see. He just ran. Before the bus came, he ran back to me and was crying and apologizing. I regrettably went back home with him that night, and a few weeks later got a restraining order against him. Wow, another one to be institutionalized. Story 30. I was in a supermarket in the afternoon and passed a couple in their mid-50s or early 60s, and the woman asked her husband if he could read her something on a package because she forgot her glasses. He yelled at the top of his lungs something about how he was not going to be put out because she was a freaking idiot that forgot her glasses. This woman was very diminutive and had her head down and looked like he put her down all the time. It got really hot, really fast seeing this. So I went up to him and said, "Come talk to me that way. I bet you won't." I'm 6 feet and a pretty strong girl, which was 4 inches taller than him. I proceeded to help the lady read the crap she needed, and he went out to the car, never having responded to my comment. Story 31. I was once walking up the street late one evening when I was approached by a young teen, likely about 15 or so. I was asked, "Yo, you got anything I can use to tap that fat bum over there? I don't want to catch nothing." I then motioned to a teen girl that was just slightly up the street. I, a married man, don't carry rubbers on me, so I said, "No, I don't." Hopefully she has the sense to not be interested. Apparently he didn't hear or didn't care, because he immediately turned around and yelled to the young girl, "Hey witch, get your bum over here. Time to start walking. This guy doesn't have anything for us." This was the part that saddened me most. She followed, giggling and smiling the whole time. She was referred to as a witch and insulted repeatedly. I shook my head, wondering how anyone can be happy about being treated like a piece of meat. Story 32. I was walking along a street in a big town. In a nearby corner, a motorbike was waiting at a red light, with a guy driving and a girl sitting behind him. When the red light switched to green, the guy accelerated. However, he clearly overdid it because the front wheel started to lift, and within a second or so, the motorbike was in a vertical position. First, the girl fell, then the guy, and then the motorbike came to a loud halt a couple of meters down the road. The guy got up instantly, while the girl was lying on the road and didn't move. Immediately, a small crowd appeared around the girl and tried to help her. The guy, however, first walked to his motorbike to check if there was any damage. Only after taking care of his bike did he come to see how the girl was doing. By then, she was standing, apparently not hurt, but shaking. The only thing the guy said, "Babe, you know this wasn't the first time this happened, and you know it won't be the last time." Story 33. I was hanging out on the porch of my frat house, bite me, drinking a few beers late one night with a buddy or two when I saw on the sidewalk this guy clearly arguing with his girlfriend. Now, normally I wouldn't pay too much mind, but this was not your run-of-the-mill argument. She was crying and clearly extremely upset, and he was laying into her for some reason or another. I motioned to my buddy if he's seeing this, and just about then, the guy bucks up like he was about to hit her right there on the street in the middle of campus. We both get up and hurry over to confront him as he's clearly about to beat down this girl. We tell him to lay off and go the heck home, and he starts getting smart with us and is still screaming at his girl right in front of us. At this point, I'm about ready to swing on him, but fortunately we were able to get him to ignore her long enough to get her to go home. She left, and he eventually walked on home in a different direction, looking angry and still calling us out. And that was the day I prevented mistreatment. This guy was a schmuck. Should have given him a black eye or two. Story 34. I'm eating at a pretty nice, expensive place because I had a 70-hour work week and wanted to treat myself. This girl and 5 of her girlfriends come in, obviously a girl's night out. They're trailed by a rather down-looking guy. They make gossipy girl chat. Much of it my stupid boyfriend, and much of that from the girl whose boyfriend was right there. He's just looking depressed and not saying much. I remember overhearing something to the effect of, "Has he fixed your car yet?" "No, the lazy schmuck," followed by a swift smack to the head. I ended up getting up, going over and voicing my opposition, to which they responded, "Mind your own freaking business." I went over to the head waiter, who looked over just as she hit him again. However, given it was girl on guy, plus maybe the fact that they were ordering a lot, he saw no problem with it. He finished, and he of course footed the bill for all of them, which had to have been at least $300. On the way out, he says, "Hey, it's still a bit early. Do you think I could go catch the end of the game with my friends?" "What? You selfish schmuck?" Followed by another strike. Story 35. Back in the mid-90s, my friends and I were calling all of our connections, but unable to find anyone with grass. So a friend of a friend tells us that he knows a guy. We page him, he calls us back, and tells us to meet him at a parking lot behind a Wendy's. We show up. He's already there in his Pontiac Fiero with his girlfriend. They both get out of the car, we make our transaction, and the girl asks us what we're doing tonight, basically just making small talk. This idiot turns around, slaps her, takes the gum out of his mouth and puts it in her hair, yelling at her to shut up. She starts screaming at him and he pulls a gun out of his pants and she drops to her knees, crying and begging him not to end her. He proceeds to talk crap, none of which I remember. I say, Billy, chill out, man. No need for that. It starts chuckling in this really messed up, creepy, detached way and puts away the gun. Last time I ever bought anything from anyone I didn't know. Story 36. I was in line behind a young couple at a crowded lunchery. I was sort of creepy looking at the time. I basically dressed like a homeless person. Army jacket, long hair and beard, jeans with holes in them. Also, I'm a fairly large person. The man of the couple looked back at me, then told his girlfriend that he had forgotten his wallet in the car, and walked past me towards the door. The girlfriend kept place in queue, but the man didn't go to the door. He stopped behind me, reached around me, grabbed her, then hid behind me. She jumped and screamed. I'd already been standing uncomfortably close behind her. She almost slapped me, but he fell over laughing just in time to save me. At first, I was mortified, but in a moment, I realized how hilarious it was. I don't know how to feel about that. Story 37. Not as awful as some of the stories here, but my ex, we were together 14 years, used to be so cold to me when we were out. When we split up and he moved away, I went out one night and one of my friends, yes, friends, asked me where my friend or cousin was. I had to laugh. He was genuinely surprised when he realized we were practically married. Our mutual friends hated the way he treated me. I could not touch him, and most of the time he would not acknowledge me in public. I did catch him out, though, near the end. I knew his work was having a Christmas do, and he told me it was for employees only. I was walking through town with him, and we saw one of his colleagues. We were chatting, and his colleague said to me, "Oh, so are you coming to the Christmas party then?" I just looked at my ex and replied that I was going out by myself with friends that night. My ex did not like that. He would also do things like call me while I was in the uni lectures, just ask where his keys or lighter were. Always got annoyed if I went out with my mates, and half the time he had to cancel. And my favorite, not turning up to his niece's christening because his trousers were a little creased. I did all the cooking, cleaning, washing, dog walking, shopping, and when I told him I wanted a baby, he told me I should organize it then. We broke up shortly after my dad passed, and I was devastated losing my dad. He looked at me one day and said, "Why are you so miserable lately? I don't know why I spent 14 years trying to make it work, but that is what it does to you." Now I have the most amazing man in my life, who, quite frankly, if he meets my ex, would like to punch him. Very hard. Yeah, same here.
What's the worst thing your boyfriend or girlfriend has done to you? I'm posting this for my fiance, about me. The other night I was sick with the flu. I also ate something that had upset my stomach. On top of the flu because I'm an idiot. We went to pick up some medicine for me, and on the way home, I told him to floor it because I needed to retch and have diarrhea at the same time. Oh, did I mention that we were visiting his parents at the time? It was splendid. By the time we got to his parents' house, I sprinted to his bathroom and decided to take care of the mess first. Well, after taking the number 2 of a lifetime, I clogged the toilet. Panicking, I grabbed the plunger and tried to unclog the toilet. The toilet water stopped flowing when it reached the top, and because I wasn't stupid enough, I thought to myself, let's try to flush the toilet now. So I flushed, again. The water began flowing over the rim of the bowl. My mess was plopping over onto the floor. At this point, I'm freaking out. By freaking out, I mean my brain has stopped working and I'm laughing like a hyena because the only other option is to cry. Now my fiancé is worried because he thought I was throwing up so bad it sounded like laughter. He knocked on the locked door. "Bacon Blossom? Are you okay?" "Honey, I need your advice through the locked door." "What happened?" Just let me in." "No." After much arguing, I opened the door. He looks at me standing in an inch of water holding a plunger. He then looks at the bathroom floor with my little nuggets clinging happily to every surface. His mouth just dropped open. It was then I started bawling. "Let me wake up my mom. I can't find a mop." He struggled between his own gags. "If you love me, you will tell her it's your mess." "What?" "I swear to God, if you want to marry me, you will take the blame for this and tell her it's your mess." Needless to say, I don't do well under pressure. He ended up getting some towels and cleaning up my mess off the floor, so I'm pretty sure this is the worst thing any girl has ever done to him. If he helps clean up the mess, he's a keeper. Story 2. I was 22. This was about 10 years ago. I had a girlfriend, let's call her Sophie, and it was my best friend's 21st birthday party. Let's call him Tim. The party was amazing. About 40 to 50 people, tons of drinks, a hot tub, people dancing everywhere, girls in bikinis. It was great. For the first couple of hours, I drank a little. I was in the hot tub with Sophie, talking to her, kissing her, hugging her. We had been together for about 2 to 3 years, something like that. Anyway, she always said she wanted to try a drink, and I remember that my parents had some at my house. A bottle of Jack Daniels. As I was slightly hammered, I thought it was a good idea to get it, so I set off. When I got there, I received a text from Sophie asking me how long I was going to be. I told her about half an hour. After sending the text, I realized I could get there in about 5 minutes if I used my bike, so I did. When I arrived at the party, it was apparent that Sophie was not in the hot tub, so I searched the place. I found Tim and Sophie having intimacy in Tim's bedroom. I was horrified. I love this girl so much. I dropped the drink, walked out, and proceeded to cry my eyes out on the stairs. My other friend, let's call him James, comes over and asks me what's wrong. I told him what had happened, and he raced up the stairs. The next thing I see is James hurting Tim. James then gets everyone's attention and tells them what Tim and Sophie have done. Tim and Sophie were made outcasts, and James is now my best friend. James is a bro for life. Story 3. When I was a freshman in high school, I got my first boyfriend. He was a year older and seemed like a cool guy with similar interests. Within the first month, we went to see The Rundown. The date started out pretty normal, and we were the only people in the theater. He started trying to mess around, which was something my prude self wouldn't allow. During the scene in which a monkey jumps on the rock's face, he decided that he wanted to have intimacy. In the theater. I hurt him hard enough and often enough that he gave up. Wisely, I didn't say bye after that. Later in the weekend, we were at his father's house for his band practice. He said he'd like to go into the sauna with me. I should go in and wait. He was just finishing up. After a few minutes, I wondered where he was and decided to check. He had barricaded the door so I couldn't get out and informed me that it was punishment for what happened at the movies. It seemed like forever of me complaining that I was thirsty and my head hurt until he let me out, and I ended up passing out on the floor of his basement. Gigantic red flag number 2 was still not enough to make me get out. I told him that the things he did to me weren't right and he promised to change. When he didn't and I tried to break up with him, he threatened to end it all. After that, he became more vicious. I dumped him then. He ended up in the hospital because he attempted to end it all. I went back, they didn't change his habits, and I finally decided that I didn't care if he lived or passed away after he harmed me. He tried to end himself 3 more times and ended up in the psych ward. For months after he got out, he continued to call me. For the rest of high school and until I moved away, I made it my personal mission to tell every girl he dated that he was a schmuck who no human being should ever willingly endure. 3 of them came to me after with pretty horrible stories, and thanked me for warning them so they got out before things got as insane as they did for me. Story 4. Mine's not nearly as bad as some of the terrible things I've read in this thread, but I'll go ahead anyway. Basically, I started dating a girl at an early age. She meant everything to me, and I loved her more than anything. We both traveled together for 6 years after 6th form, and when we were older, we decided we should go to university so that we could get better jobs in the future. She missed the application date, and I ended up going to university a year before her. I ended up driving back to our hometown every weekend to see her, effectively messing up any social life I had with university friends. She never actively encouraged me to do this, but would always say how much she appreciated it and that she would do the same for me because she loved me more than anything. And to be honest, I was more than happy to do it just to see her for the short time we had. When it came her time to go to uni, she ended up going to a uni far away from where I was. I thought, not a problem. We don't have to see each other all the time. We'll work it out. And she always told me about how we'd move in together after we'd both finished. 2 weeks into her first semester, she started ignoring my calls. She eventually rang me after a week of not answering her phone and asked to meet back at her hometown. She broke up with me that night, saying, I never wanted a relationship. When we started dating, it sort of spiraled and I didn't know how to get out. Now, before anyone says the obvious, yes, I know that this is a perfectly reasonable explanation for breaking up with someone. People get into these relationships they don't want and feel tremendous guilt about breaking up with them. But I really, really wish she had just turned around after a year or 2 years. Hell, even when I was spending hundreds of pounds on petrol to get back and forth to uni to see her. I just said that then. I never understood why she thought it was better for her to be miserable and string me along for almost 7 years and just end it. I'd spent all the time thinking I was in a mutually loving relationship with a girl of my dreams. I was constantly happy. I thought of myself as the luckiest guy on the planet, and it was all just gone. We remained best friends, and when we finished uni, we saw each other every day. Until she found a new boyfriend. At which point, she put me out of her life completely. It was like losing her again. She remains friends with my friendship group, and they frequently all go out together and don't invite me. But that's another matter completely. I know it doesn't seem horrible compared to some of the stuff in this thread, but From the moment she said what she said, I've just felt pathetic and moronic. It's been 5 years since I last talked to her, and I still haven't even kissed another girl. I literally get panicked even when thinking about starting another relationship again. It just terrifies me. Since we stopped seeing each other as friends, I've basically gone through a pattern of depression and misuse. Every now and then I'll get my act together and stop feeling stupid, but I'll hear from one of my best friends about how they'd all gone out bowling or something, and it all floods back. Story 5. My ex did a lot of really mean, horrible things to me. The one that most stands out was the NYE, which also happened to be the eve of our first-year anniversary. My ex and his buddy were supposed to come pick me and my friend up from down the street from my house so we could go over to my ex's and celebrate and have our third or fourth experiment with drinks. So me and my friend are waiting for them to come pick us up, keep calling them and rolling to their voicemails. I don't want to go back to my place because my mom already hated my ex for other things he had done to me. So we just keep waiting and waiting for them. 2 hours roll by and we're still waiting in the freezing December night. Right about when we decide this really isn't worth it, my ex and pal come barreling down the road to pick us up. We hop in and ask them what took them so long, and we got a lame excuse about how they were trying to get drinks, but it took a few unsuccessful attempts. So we get to my ex's and we start drinking. I get 3 or 4 drinks, and my ex decides now's the time to tell me what really took them so long. Remember, this was one of the first times I was hammered. Apparently, they decided to stop over at another girl's dorm house to say hey. No problem there, but somehow they ended up having intimacy from 3 girls. What in the world? I hear this, of course, tears start forming. I was left in the cold waiting for my boyfriend while he was being intimate with these girls from my school who were my friends, and realizing my first-year anniversary with the guy I loved was going to be bad. He sees the tears in my eyes and says one of the most hurtful things that still lingers with me today. Oh, don't be emotional. Everyone hates an emotional girl. Don't ruin the night for everyone. Told me that in front of both friends, neither of which stood up for me. I thought it really was my fault and I was going to ruin the night for everyone. So I decided to put it in the back of my mind and pretend it didn't happen. Thankfully, the next day I did a 180 with my thoughts and called him on it. We broke up shortly after that awesome anniversary discussion. To top it all off, I talked to my friend that went to the girls' house with my ex and 3 girls. Apparently, he pretty much forced himself. None of them felt comfortable with it and didn't want to do anything. It made it so much worse to realize he really made me think it was all my fault. Didn't care about me, left me in the cold, made other girls really uncomfortable so he could get what they wanted from them, and really just didn't care about me. Made it my fault in my eyes. Story 6. We'll probably get buried here, but here we go. I moved to another state to date this guy I had known and had been friends with for about a year. We moved in together and dated for over 2 years. I gave him my V card and pretty much took care of him because he was a man-child who spent all of his money on video games and action figures, but I was okay with it because we got along great. He's slightly overweight, has been his entire life, and before we dated was always getting friend-zoned by girls, so I never thought he would cheat on me. So of course, he cheated on me. A lot. The entire time we were dating, with several girls, one of which was married, her husband watched. Some of them knew he had a girlfriend, some of them didn't. Some of them he had intimacy with. Anyway, the best part is when we eventually broke up and he moved out, he took the bed with him, which was fine since I was about to move, and tried to steal my pillows. Yes, we actually had an argument over pillows, which I had bought, while his friend who was helping him move stood by and watched. At that point, I was pretty much over everything that had happened, but he was going to have to pry those pillows out of my cold fingers before I gave them to him. Story 7. My ex went out of town with her dad. They went, via train, from Phoenix to Seattle. The second night she was on the train, she was being very sketchy to me and not answering many of my texts. She finally called me and sounded a little intoxicated. We talked for a couple of minutes and she said, "Hold on, I'll call you back in 5 minutes. I'm just ordering another drink." She also mentioned that she became good friends with a bartender. Keep in mind, she was 22 at the time, so she doesn't call me back for another day or 2. I'm a little weirded out, but I don't really question much. When she got back, everything was cool for a couple weeks. She then told me that her and her dad needed to go to LA for a weekend to do stuff about their passports since they were going to Japan the next summer. I researched what you would need to go to LA for regarding your passport. Didn't get any leads. I asked if she was cool if I came out there with her and her dad for the weekend. She was very hesitant and said no, because they were splitting a hotel room. I told her I could pay. One night she gets hammered and passed out in my front seat on the way home. Out of curiosity, I looked in her texts and saw these texts from the bartender from the train. Basically, when she told me she would call me back, she went and had intimacy with this dude. Her dad was also aware of this. I immediately pulled over the car, moved her out on the side of the road. The next day, I reported him to Amtrak. I had his full name, and he was fired. Story 8. I had decided to try dating my best guy friend. We were really rough. His ex told me he was cheating on me with her since the first week of dating. He denied it. I was crazy and in denial about that. He sneaked around and saw her behind my back, lied about it, got caught in lies, would get out to see her hammered with his friends, and was generally just using me. One night I told him that I loved him for the first time. He dumped me the next day, a few days before Valentine's Day. We eventually get back together and the same deal happens. April comes. I was talking to him on Facebook. I screenshot and post some of the conversation in which he was talking down to me. I blur his photo and name and everything. He says we need to talk. A while later, he just barges into my dorm room. He lived nearby. I lived alone and left the door unlocked. He pulls the chair out from under me, yells an order to delete the blog posts and threatens to delete a lot of other things. I push him back. I demand over and over that he leave. I wasn't really sure what to do, so I just locked the door and sat down and wrote out what had happened, posting it to the blog to spite him, I guess. We continue arguing about what happened. He denies everything. He tells me that no one would care if I passed away, that I'm the only reason my mother drinks, and all sorts of horrible things, but denies laying a finger on me. We argue for the better part of the evening. He ends it saying he loves me. For some reason, I bought it. When I told someone about what had happened, he told me I was probably exaggerating and deserved it. I eventually got back with Schmuck. He kept cheating, blah, blah, blah. I tried dating someone in the fall, but it didn't really pan out and went back to him, though not officially together. As of last month, I'm finally no longer speaking to him. We go to the same school, and was paranoid that he'll show up at random or something. When I was dating the other guy, he spotted me in a class, followed me as I ran out of the building on my bike, raced back to my dorm, up to my dorm, and knocked on my door until I ran out to meet someone, throwing threats to talk to security over my shoulder. Story 9. When I was in high school, I thought I was dating the love of my life. We were both really happy, and everything was great for such a long time. During the end of my freshman year, things took a turn for the worse. She started to have interest in this guy, and even though she denied it, I could tell she wanted him. I begged and pleaded with her to tell me the truth, and she never did. There was one time where they both skipped a class together and went to an abandoned house while we were still dating. Freshman year comes, and she tells me she has to live a few states down at her dad's house. It was heartbreaking, but I told her I would wait for her. I received texts from her older sister saying she's been talking to some guys, and I confront her about it. She freaks out on me, and after a couple of weeks, we patch things up. She comes home early, and I'm delighted. I ask her if I can come over the first day she's back, and she says she's too busy unpacking and spending time with her family, which is understandable. The next day comes, and she says she's too tired to spend time with me, and she was just going to lay in bed all day. And the third day, when I asked her, she just left me. She sends me a message over MySpace, lol, saying I'm clingy and that she never wants to see me again. Heartbroken me wah-wahs over her for weeks. I'm at a friend's house about 2 months later, and he teaches me how to lurk. I go to her profile, and I see that she's been talking to that boy about how great of a night they had. I look in a little deeper, and what? They had been dating for 2 days after her and I broke up. I confronted her about this, and she said I ruined her birthday, and she says she's sorry for everything, and she says she's just mentally unstable. Feels bad, man. Sophomore year starts, and I stay home one day. She sneaks into my house while she's dating that day, and we do lots of stuff. I ask her if we're together again, and she says she is, and she says she's done with that other boy. Come to school the next day, and I expect her and I to be happy together, but she's just being weird around me. I confront her about it, and she says she still loves the other guy. Heartbroken me goes home and mopes for a long time, realizing we're not actually together. A few weeks pass by, and all the girls in my school hate her. I stick up for her and give her my sweatshirt. I get suspended for 5 days, and when I come back, she's no longer there. I didn't see or talk to her for 8 months, and even her best friend wouldn't tell me where she was. I got a letter after 8 months from her telling me she's in a mental institution. Needless to say, I'm speechless. We sent letters back and forth for a long time, and I thought after she was released, we could be together. She stopped mailing me for 5 months, and I became interested in a new girl, but I obviously still have feelings for the crazy girl. One day, Crazy calls me and tells me to come pick her up at a Walmart. I hadn't seen her for about a year, so I sped there without questions. She told me in the car that she had escaped the mental institution and she had nowhere to go. Her mom calls my house and tells me the cops are after me. I drop her off at a gas station so she can meet up with her friends, and I haven't seen her since. I realize she's psychotic and found closure. No longer sad about her. The words witches be crazy have never been so true. Anyways, if you're enjoying the video, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos like this. Story 10. It was the night of my birthday, which was a big deal because I could finally drink legally in Quebec. Anyway, a friend's uncle owned a bar over there, and the entire floor of the bar was reserved for our friends. Everyone I knew was going for my birthday. We were all at the same age, and it was going to be an epic first night of drinking legally for me. People I hadn't spoken to in years were telling me over Facebook all week how they were going to make it to this epic party. So that evening, I'm pre-drinking with my girlfriend and some of her friends, and we're all getting super stoked for the party. But I noticed my girlfriend has finished almost an entire drink herself, and she was a pretty messy lightweight. But she seemed fine, so whatever. It's all good. We called a cab and got ready to head out. We go to the bar, and some of our friends had a few drinks to finish before we headed in, so they went around the corner to chug them. This is when all hell broke loose. My girlfriend instantly switches from sober or mildly buzzed to full-blown hammered. She starts screaming insanely at every person that walks by. Even people from our school who came up to say hi to her are getting screamed at. I tried to tell her to chill, but she's past reasoning at this point. So I tell her I'm going into the bar without her. This, for some reason, brings her back down to sanity level for a moment, and she opens her purse to grab her ID to show the bouncer. Oops, guess what? No ID in sight. She's screaming or crying at this point and starts throwing tantrums for no apparent reason. I manage to grab her and walk her to a cab, so we both get in and I tell him to just drive us back to my place. Halfway through the drive, as she's crying or sobbing, the cabbie moves us out. So we walk about the last 20 minutes to my house, but mind you, my birthday is in December in Canada, so it's about negative 20 degrees Celsius out. In case you were wondering, I was more sober than an AA meeting at this point. We finally get to my house and I drag her upstairs and put her in the bed. Go take a shower and throw my clothes in the wash. Go back, put the covers over us, and just decide to sleep it all off and try to talk to her about it in the morning. Story 11. Man, this hits pretty close to home right now. I just broke up with my girlfriend. Feeling kind of down right now. My girlfriend was a terrible person, but so manipulative that it was impossible to tell. Honestly, she had me so wrapped up that even after all the crap she put me through, I still can't get over her. I dated her for 2 years. I'm older, 32, and she's 24 now. When we met, she was still in college, but really seemed to have her stuff together. I was actually very impressed with her. Her skill and manipulation is so amazing that even to this day, I'm amazed at how flawlessly she can alter a person's perception of her. So much so, in fact, that I'm having a lot of difficulty getting over her, even though she's probably the worst person I've ever met. She wound up cheating on me with the president of an organization I'm a part of. It was prolonged and unbelievable. She would have intimacy with one of us and then the other a few hours later and was somehow still able to keep it secret. It was honestly one of the worst things I've ever had done to me by another human. We both, the other guy and I, wound up planning to marry this girl. I finally figured it out and confronted her. She convinced me to stay with her. Again, she could manipulate her way out of anything, and I hate that I was so susceptible to her. In any case, after all that, she dumped me out of the blue a few weeks ago, right after I'd put the security deposit down on the apartment she's in now. I also furnished the whole place and was intending to move to NC to be with her. I even had a new job lined up. As it is now, I'm so far in debt due to her and my stupidity that it'll be years before I'm in the black again. Anyway, I'm older than most Redditors, so I want to pass on a bit of advice to the men. Most men are brought up with the thought that women are somehow less likely to do morally reprehensible things. Because of this, sometimes we allow ourselves to be easily deceived. Women are lucky in this regard. They almost expect men to be schmucks. They're always on guard. But guys, let me tell you, women can be spawns of Satan. They can do it with a smile. Don't ever let your guard down, especially if they seem perfect. Story 12. Ex number 1 pretends to be pregnant even though we'd never had intimacy before and claims she's still pure. I advise her that she's not Mother Mary and she breaks up with me for how you treated me when my world was falling down around me. Find out a month later that she was never pregnant and was just testing me. Ex number 2. This is the one that I thought to be the love of my life. We did everything together and had nearly everything in common as well. Was a huge daddy's girl, though. Her dad has a completely unexpected stroke and passes away. Girlfriend snaps, but she's getting counseling and things seem like they're getting better. One night I'm talking to her mom in the kitchen about her upcoming birthday. Girlfriend shows up and grabs a weapon and lunges at me while screaming, "Daddy shouldn't be here. He's gone." I had to pin my girlfriend to the ground until the police came to take her away. Ex number 3. Moved across the world to be with this girl. Breaks up with me 6 months later on the week of Christmas. She has major emotional problems and a pretty rough family household, so I let her stay with me. I know, stupid, stupid, stupid. Arguing constantly over the span of 2 years. Stupid, stupid, stupid. Until things peak. I tell her I have no respect for her as she's still not done anything with her life in the 3 years I've known her. She flips out. I try to call the police, but she keeps taking the phone out of the wall. Trying to call the police again. She takes out the phone again. I wait outside after calling the police, crying, thinking that I'm going to get arrested and completely ashamed of myself. They arrive and get both of our sides of the story and then basically tell her she had it coming. I don't get arrested and they make her go back to her parents' house. I finally learned to stay away from the crazy. Story 13. I was in high school at the time, this was many moons ago, and started dating Steve. I met him while I was working at the mall, like you do, or did, when you were in high school. He ended up getting moved out of the place he was staying. I felt bad, so I ended up giving him the majority of my pay so he could stay in a hotel or something. A few weeks later, my parents went away for the weekend, and the worst party ever happened. Steve ended up stealing some of my mom's jewelry and pawning it. A bunch of other really awful stuff happened that weekend, so I didn't realize at first it was him, the trusting person that I was. Since this was a very small town of less than 2,000 people where everyone knows everyone, the police got involved. I was still in phone contact with Steve, but hadn't seen him since he left my house. I was grounded, and he kind of skipped town. He called me and started hinting around at what happened with the jewelry. And it finally dawned on me what had happened. All of this happened while I was at work. I called the police department. I'm really not this much of a stoolie under normal circumstances, and tell them what I think happened. The next day, Steve called wanting to pick up his belongings he had stashed in my closet. My mom called the police to meet him at my house. Steve shows up with his girlfriend, who he had been dating the entire time we were together. The police show up and he's taken away. It turns out that Steve's name was a lie. It turns out that he had been impersonating a singer from a pretty famous local band, and a couple of other things that the passing of time has wiped from my memory. After about 6 months' time, I was on the phone with a friend and the call waiting buzzed in. It was Steve. He tells me that he knows where I live and that he's going to harm me. Normally, something like this wouldn't faze me, but given the situation, I believed him. The next day, I told one of my guy friends who happened to work at the same mall as I did. I was freaking out. Steve shows up at the mall the next day and my buddy, a pretty big, hairy, intimidating guy, proceeds to threaten him in some way that I never saw or heard from him ever again. Until he showed up at the auto parts store where I worked about 5 years later. I don't know if he recognized me, but seeing him threw me into a huge panic. He's the only person in my life who truly frightened me. It's 20 years later, and I'll still have the occasional nightmare about him. Story 14. My first girlfriend and only long-term relationship so far, 2 years and a half. I started dating in my senior year in college. I'd committed myself to 2 jobs so I could pay for a place for us to live and get her through school. She'd been pushing me for intimacy, but I really wanted to wait. She teased me for weeks, so by the end I was craving for intimacy. Skip a few months later and we were pretty much seeing each other every day, even if it was just for an hour. My work and she was still in school. During her senior year of college, she got her first job at a store. Everyone there envied her figure, her physical attractiveness, how witty and smart she was. One day I came to visit her at work, and her manager scolded her after I left her for being the scrawny, dirty, poor boy I was and that she needed to get out and find real man. She wanted to feel older and more mature. As people had treated her when she was younger, but now she was stagnating and not getting that same attention. She was 22 and they took her out clubbing. We didn't drink, but she wanted to fit in with her new, older friends from work. She did this for a few months. Then she slept with a guy. As recounted by a girl at work that disapproved all of this, I came to see her at work a few days later. A Friday, I think it was. It was payday and I had enough money saved that I was going to buy her dinner, dress as nice as I could and tell her my plans to move out together and pay for her post-secondary. She dismissed me over the phone and said she was busy. I can remember I thought I heard someone kissing her neck, but I ignored it as something else. Because I'm her boyfriend and she loves me, and that can't possibly be what I thought it was. Fast forward a few more weeks, and I got laid off at one of my jobs. They were hit by the recession and they needed to cut back, so they asked if I wanted to stay. I had to do a ton more things. I was stable with my savings, so I thought I could take the extra time to spend with my girlfriend or find a new job. I called her to see if she wanted to hang out, and if I could finally tell her my plans. She was very hesitant and eventually agreed. When we met, she didn't greet me with a kiss and just asked why I wasn't at work. I told her I quit to sound more manly and capable and in control of my life. Turns out she saw it as me being a quitter and told me we needed a break. I was shocked. I was so heartbroken. She said she needed a month to think things through. I called her and tried to meet her at work and give her roses, but when I got there, the one friend, who didn't tell me a thing, said she was probably home. I got there as fast as I could. When I got there, I had to knock 100 times until she opened the door. She was in her bathrobe I bought her. I didn't think twice, but I remember there being extra shoes at her door. I asked her if her dad was visiting, divorced parents, and if it was a bad time. She said no, but that still she wanted me to go away. I gave her the rose and left. The time limit comes up. She asks me to meet. I was there hours early. She walks over to where I'm sitting, wearing sunglasses, tie black jeans, and a black leather jacket. She sits down, takes off her glasses, and tells me how it was a pathetic waste of time and a lot of other things that are painful to bring up. She leaves me quivering and crying. I see her walk out and get picked up in a shiny black BMW, definitely not her mom's or dad's car. The friend who disapproved found where I worked and came to visit me. She brought my ex's best friend with her too. She told me everything. And the best friend too, who wanted to know what was going on with her best friend. They'd known each other for 10 years. She told us how the manager would take them out. The best friend had been wanting to tell my ex that she was not straight so that she could come out to someone, but the ex never wanted to see her anymore. I remember that girl coming out to us, and I was so angry that my ex had turned into some crazy psychopath for no reason. The guy's from an East Indian family that is quite well off, if you can think of a thing that is worth a lot of money and people need it for energy. He owns a small business locally and has employed her as the cute front face that people talk to. She makes a lot of money. She's attending the same post-secondary as me, owns a car, and lives with this guy. Did I mention he's 9 years older than her? By society's standards, she won. I lost. I wonder if I can let myself love again. I wonder if there's love to be had for the dirty poor boy with dreams. Story 15. Let me tell you. He had to go to a 10-hour band practice the Friday of my 21st birthday weekend, even though I told him that I wanted to spend the entire weekend with him. At these practices, the guys drink, troll, and talk about how bad their lives are. They don't perform live and they don't have an EP. I supported his band because I loved him. He got a DUI that night and never came home. He then blamed me for the DUI because he was unable to remember the phone call we had that night where I asked him to sleep where he was and how I wouldn't be mad if he came to see me the next morning. I never demanded that he come see me. His safety was more important to me. He kissed his neighbor at a kickback that I wasn't at. I was chill with the situation because I get that mistakes happen, so I just said, don't let it happen again. 2 weeks later, he flirted with a girl at a New Year's party and didn't hang out with me the entire night. Later that night, he was hammered and we were trying to sleep. It's about 4 a.m. He disrespected me. After all of this, I was then upset over the previous kiss. Apparently, I was at fault for being upset at him because I was upset over false pretenses. In his eyes, of course. He thought that the kiss was justified because the girl apologized to him the next day, because she had a boyfriend, and because it didn't mean anything. Oh, okay. He didn't feel the need to truly apologize, make anything up to me, or compromise with me or anything because he thought that I was always at fault. We've been together for over a year at this point. I then do the hardest thing of my entire life and break my own heart because he wouldn't do it on his own. I went on a break with my first true love and most special boy, the guy that will be in my heart forever. He was my first everything. Words can't describe what we had together. He then breaks up with me and tells everyone that I broke up with him because I couldn't handle him having a DUI. Months after the breakup, he sends me into an emotional spiral where I lost myself. Cried every morning and night and lost all of my friends. For 8 months of my life, where he completely ignored me and shut me out. Didn't give me closure to this day, except for the times he told me that he loved me and missed me. He told me to prove that I loved him, but then he wouldn't make time for me to see him. I opened myself up to my core and wholeheartedly told him in person that I was in love with him, that he was the most special guy in my life. He hasn't contacted me since. He's now with a new girl who, in my opinion, is nothing compared to the person I was to him. But I guess he's happy with a dumber and uglier chick. We were the type of couple where we would hold hands in the car together and sing to our favorite bands. I would sing the girl parts and he would sing the guy parts. Maybe love will find me again. Story 16. Good guy James. I want to be that James someday. Anyways, so now for my own little tidbit of a story. I was dating my then love of my life. We lived a few hours apart, so I only really got to see her on the weekends. This was fine though. We made the best of it. Then one day, on Wednesday, I believe, she went to her best friend's female house for the night, so I didn't get to talk to her that evening. The next day we're on Skype and she mentions that she had been drinking at her friend's house and that it was a pretty fun night. Me, being the innocently curious one, asked her if anything crazy went down while they were drinking. She said not really, but then started laughing and explained that at one point during the night, she had burped into her friend's mouth. At first I was kind of shocked because that's pretty disgusting, but I brushed it off. Then after talking for another 10 to 15 minutes, it hit me. One does not simply burp into another person's mouth unless their mouths are basically touching each other, which means kissing. I asked her about it, and she eventually admitted that she spent the better part of the night making out with her friend. Now, for most guys, this would be their dream, to have a girlfriend kissing another girl, but for me, it felt just as if she had cheated on me with a guy. I felt like the sanctity of what we had going on was completely disrespected. I didn't talk to her for quite a while after that. I think it might have also brought about the demise of our relationship because I just couldn't trust her anymore after that. I felt like she tore me in half. And before anyone asks, one of the reasons it felt like she had cheated on me, even though it was just her best friend, was because she had admitted to liking both guys and girls before we'd gone together. Story 17. So my college boyfriend was a writer, and he also had a ton of mental issues, mostly dealing with his weight, so he had checked out of the relationship for a good long while and just kind of wasn't there mentally. I tried to help him, but in all fairness, I was probably a little demanding, wanting to be romanced and in a good relationship. I'm also very affectionate. I love hugs and kisses and general cuddling. This comes up later. So one day I get back from classes and see him writing, already has like a couple pages. I ask him what he's working on and tells a story, and I leave him alone to write and go make food or play video games. He comes out later and drops some pages in my lap and asks me to read it and tell him what I think. I leaf through the pages to see how many there are, and in the back I see one called cast of characters. Jamie is Mike, or him. Sam, Liz, me. Jane equals Jenna, his ex-girlfriend. So I started to read this story, and it's like our life, down to our routine of eating sandwiches together in between classes. However, in the story, Sam, or me, is an ice princess who often looks through him and is very aloof. So when Jamie or he goes home on spring break, he ends up cheating on Sam by having intimacy with Jane or his ex in the back of his car. I read the story a couple times to be sure and came back into our room pretty much going, "What in the world is this?" He never really answered me, and then later I found out he joined up on eharmony.com because he was bored one day.
Women. Define crazy in terms of men you've dated. I dated a hippie artist kind of guy who drove a VW bus and wrote bad poetry. He was a model student and very nice to me in the beginning. We got together, and a few months later he started telling me these stories about people he had harmed. He said he'd cut the gas lines in his grandma's house and she passed away. He said he'd pushed his best friend off a cliff, etc. I wasn't sure if I should believe all this, but when he finally said that I knew too much and he needed to get rid of me, I told my school counselors. The police came, questioned him, and hauled him off for a psych eval. Turns out he was schizophrenic. He went on meds, and his parents shipped him off to military school. The next time I saw him, it was ranting Republican. Another guy I dated was also crazy. He was a pathological liar and told everyone he had been struggling with cancer for years. He also told us wild stories about famous people he had hung out with. At some point, he got really fixated on me. I just wanted to be friends. I fooled around with another guy. One day, my boyfriend came to a party where a crazy guy was at also. Crazy guy grabbed a weapon and a tire iron, and chased my boyfriend around the apartment complex until the police came. Safe to say, you are a magnet for crazy, girl. Story 2. I caught him collecting my hair and saving it in an envelope. So basically what happened was that I was leaving the room and turned around to see him picking up a couple of my hairs off his bed and sticking them in an envelope he had on his desk, which, by the way, already contained something of a collection. I asked him to stop and please, dear God, just throw them away. But his response was basically, "But they're so pretty. I won't do it." Yeah, our brief relationship was pretty much over at that point, although I should have known something was up when he licked my armpit a couple of days beforehand. Oh, and for the record, I'm strawberry blonde and the hairs were from my head. Lol. Story 3. I dated a guy that was a very definition of a possessive boyfriend. He saw any interaction I had with a man as a threat and would often threaten these guys if they didn't stop talking to me. He also accused me of cheating on him constantly and was always suspicious and often cruel. Yelling, pushing me around. We'd been dating for about 2 months or so and I found out he was cheating on me. We'd both agreed on monogamy. This wasn't part of the deal, so I broke up with him. A week later, he called me to say he got tested and was HIV positive. We were mostly careful and used rubbers when we had been together, but there were times when we hadn't. I spent 2 months freaking out, and after getting tested a couple of times at the end of the incubation period, or whatever it's called, thankfully found out I'm not positive. I found out a few months later from common friends that he'd been bragging about how he got me with a false HIV story as a way of seeking revenge for the breakup. Thankfully, I'm dating a wonderfully sane and rational guy now. The kind of guy who just epitomizes nice, you know? And he definitely gets me excited, so I lucked out. Good for you. Story 4. I got one about a guy. He was a friend, and this is what he did to his girlfriend. As a result, we're no longer friends. Bugged her computer. Would sit for hours, like more than 8 per day, just waiting to watch her MSN convos, go through her emails, etc., etc. Used to read her journal when she was not paying attention and he was over. He was snooping and discovered it. Using these methods, he would surprise her with gifts that he discovered she wanted, things she would mention to friends she wanted a boyfriend to do, made him seem perfect to her, wanted me to harm him with a weapon so he could tell her he got in a bar brawl. She was a very young party girl he was prepped with no clue, and make him seem tough. Started trying to create his own from pharmaceuticals that he ordered online from India and other places. This way he could impress her. He would obsess for hours over a one-line email that said, "Too tired to hang out tonight. Tomorrow's better." And ask me, "But what do you think it means?" Over and over and over. Finally, it ended when he read that she had cheated on him twice. He lied to her and said that I had told him, citing that I had a mutual friend with her, which was a lie. Scary thing is that she never found out. So they were both red flags? Does that cancel out? Story 5. I've dated a string of crazy guys. Most recent ex-boyfriend is a police officer for the city I live in. He broke up with me in January so he could start dating the girl he'd been cheating on me with. I didn't find this out until after, or else we'd have been done a lot sooner. He would still call me all the time when he would want to hang out because he missed me. It got to the point that I'd see him calling and I just wouldn't pick up or acknowledge his calls. There were about 3 or so different instances where he pulled me over in traffic so he could ask, "Why haven't you called me back?" I filed a half-hearted complaint with the city and the police precinct, but it didn't go anywhere because he's one of their golden boys. Story 6. There's the guy I dated for just a couple months who decided that me breaking up with him was a good reason to end himself. Called me and texted me over 50 times in an hour. I kept him on the phone for hours while he went on about how horrible his life was now that I was breaking up with him. The call got cut off at one point, so I called the cops and told them there he was. And I got an angry phone call from him later over the embarrassment of them banging on his door in the middle of the night. He was staying in a hotel on a work assignment. He further convinced himself that I had been cheating on him. Not true. He got really angry when I told his friends about his attempt because I thought they needed to know to be able to support him. I haven't really been in relationships with other crazy people, thankfully. I've gone on dates with a handful, but those were so fleeting I don't remember details very well. Story 7. A few years ago, I dated a guy that was a tad insecure. Even though he knew I would be at work, practice, or class, he would leave at least 18 messages on my phone. I don't think a 1-hour class deserves an average of 10 missed calls, and every time I sneezed, coughed, was injured in practice, etc., it was always his fault, and he would cry and try to make himself pay for it. It was as if he couldn't keep me protected or inside enough. It didn't last long. Were you dating a 5-year-old? Story 8. My ex. Violent, prone to mood swings, crying, and physical and emotional cruelty. Over the course of 3 years with him, I gained quite a significant bit of weight. He wanted me to get fat so that no one else would love me. I wasn't allowed to leave the house with the exception of school and work, unless it was with him. His rage was terrifying. Just thinking about how mad he would get over simple things makes me feel sick to my stomach. Went out on a date with this guy, and within 10 minutes, he's talking about making a family together. I'd just gotten released from a 13-month vacation in a Crowbar hotel and was just interested in getting some. We hooked up a couple of times, and then I told him I just wasn't interested in being his girlfriend. He freaked out on me, telling me that I was only breaking up with him because my family is well off, which was hilarious because we most definitely were not. He refused to get a job because 95% of the options for employment where he lived were beneath him. When I started dating my now boyfriend, he sent me messages telling me that I was only dating him for his money, which is also hilarious because he didn't have any. He also refused to go anywhere unless he was completely dressed in black, once refusing to go to the grocery store because his socks were in black. Apparently he's been accepted to Mensa and brags about that quite a bit. That just proves to me that the requirements to be a part of Mensa aren't that stringent. Story 9. Crazy is the guy that installed a keylogger in my computer to catch me cheating, which he never did. This is something I just don't understand. If I thought someone was cheating on me, I wouldn't waste the effort to try to catch them in the act. I would just leave and save myself from the drama. If they were giving me reasons not to trust them, then I'm wasting my time. I don't see why more people don't have this opinion. Who the heck wants to be with someone that you can't trust? I've seen too many girls and guys lose their heads over stuff like this. Insecurity is a witch. Story 10. I dated this guy for a pretty long time. He was pretty crazy the entire time, but the pinnacle of his craziness came after we weren't together anymore. A chunk of our relationship took place when I was a teenager and him in his early 20s. The breakup was hard on both of us, but very necessary. We were living together at the time of the split and had a ton of stuff that fell into the ours category. I left most of it to him as I was desperate to be free of him. There were a few things, though, that were expressly mine that I forgot. A full 4 months after we broke up, we met so he could give me back a few things. We sat at a picnic table across from one another and he handed me a box. I started to dig through it and found some old pictures. Awesome. Some CDs I loved, Fantastic. Assorted ticket stubs. Oh, fun. Other stuff like that. Nostalgia-tastic. At the bottom of the box, my hand grazed a C-shaped piece of metal. I pulled it out and recognized it instantly as a metal wire and figured it was just some junk that ended up in the box. I put the things I wanted in a tote bag and passed the box back to him and put the wire in the ashtray sitting on the table. I look up and Max is looking at me with this weird, wounded expression. He trembles. Do you know what that is? He gestures to the ashtray. I shrug. An underwire garment thingy? Why? He gives me this dirty, mean, and aggressive look and tells me that the wire was the wire from your midnight blue and silver gray push-up demi cup. His exact words. That was a garment that I had owned 5 years earlier. 5. It was also the garment I had on when I lost my V-card to him. This whole thing wasn't weird enough. He then took the wire out of the ashtray and put it back in the box. Then he and the box left. Okay, buddy. Story 11. I dated a guy who was about 50 pounds overweight and liked to tell me I could stand to lose a few pounds. I was 5'6" and 130 pounds. Also dated a guy who got mad at me because I bought him socks for Christmas because after noticing his socks all had holes in them, he was really strange about his clothes and always wore the same old sweater over and over, even when someone bought him something new. Maybe it had a lot of sentimental value. Story 12. When I was 18, I dated my friend's older brother for a couple of years. I had had a thing for him since I was 14, so I was pretty excited to be dating him. It was sweet at first, then he got kind of clingy, then when I told him I needed some space, he got really angry and started screaming at me, telling me I was a witch, that he knew I'd been cheating on him. I got really mad and told him to get lost. Then I'd come home from work and he'd be waiting outside my house for me. That was always fun. Once I got a ride home with a friend, a woman, and we were just sitting in the car laughing about our day, and then when I got out and started walking down the path to my back door, he creepily emerged from the bushes, where he'd been hiding and watching me, and again, accused me of sleeping with other people. He was jealous in a crazy sort of way, like when I'd go out back to the garden and he'd think I was going out to show off to the neighbors. Anyway, I was young, stupid, and deep in the throes of puppy love. I wised up and am now in a much more healthy relationship. Story 13. I dated a guy for 2 months who decided that never call me again meant that he should call me every day for another 2 months and send me weird text messages and emails about seeing us maybe getting married someday and not having enough God in our relationship. Never once did religion factor into our relationship. When I finally blocked his calls, he then called me again a year after I dumped him and left no message, and again a few months ago, this now 2.5 years later, to leave me a nonchalant voicemail about how he was back in town and wanted to know if we could meet up. Never once answered a call or text from him. I mean, who clings that much to someone you're dating for only a couple months? Story 14. Well, I didn't date him, but my mom did. I was just unlucky enough to be a single teen stuck in the house at the time. I'm not too social, but I can smell a sociopath 10 miles away. And I didn't like this guy. Oblivious mom convinced herself that it was because I was afraid he would take my dad's place and all that horse crap, which had nothing to do with it at all. The guy was a schmuck. Well, they started dating. And he started borrowing things from my mom and helping her with all sorts of stuff that she didn't need, but he insisted no human being could live without it, and he was infinitely wise, and she believed that this manly man surely knew better than her, so she spent a crap load of money on stupid crap that only stupid men over 50 would find relevant. And if she wanted to see him, she could drive that 45-minute drive and see him. He had no car, and if he took that scooter to see her, she had better damn well pay for his gas as well. Still no reaction from my mom, who was just so thankful a man finally was showing her attention. Or so she thought. He got mad when I pointed out it was more like her wallet. Apparently she told him this, and all of a sudden he got this great idea. It was about time that I should move out. I was 17 at the time, and he could move in. Luckily my mom liked me a little more than him, so I gotta stay. Well, then stuff in my room started to move around on its own. I pointed it out, and mom was like, "Oh, it's so messy, how would you know?" So I planted a hate letter right front in the top drawer of my desk. To Schmuck. Well, funny, because a week after that, he was in a rage over me. The best thing was how Schmuck couldn't even explain to my mom why I was such a problem. Going in my room and reading private stuff on my desk would be a deal breaker. So instead, he started trying to sweet talk me, getting me to spend my money on great deals that he could help with so we could bond, at least according to the sales pitch he gave my mom. So one day my mom crosses his line. God forbid. She hugged him, went home and called 3 days later. He'd contacted a lawyer and was threatening to sue my mother for breaking his arm and shoulder while hugging him. My mom says he can buzz off. He then starts calling, proclaiming that she owes him money for the days he couldn't work because of his broken shoulder. Turns out, Schmuck fell off a ladder at home and sprained the thing and decided to make money off my mom. My mom stopped talking to him after that, except for Christmas and her birthday for a few years after that. He would call and leave messages on the machine, telling my mom how much he hopes she rots in hell and that she still owes him money and then have a nice day. Did anybody say sociopath? I did. Several times. Well, some lonely people are desperate and don't see red flags. Story 15. I went on one day with a very nerdy guy who tried to convince me that he and his friends used to try to get hit by cars for money. This was so painfully and obviously untrue. It was difficult to sit still until the drink was finished and I could go home. One guy stood me up on the third date, because his new Mercedes had arrived at the dealer and he wanted to drive around fast by himself. I heard nothing from him all night. Got an apologetic voicemail the next day. Okay, fine. I decided he wasn't into me and never called him back. 4 months later, I got an email suggesting we meet up for intimacy. For 2 years, this guy would send me suggestive emails every 3 or 4 months, even though I never wrote him back. Rich people are freaking crazy. And I stopped dating anyone with serious money after that. Story 16. I'm not a woman, but I had to tell the story of a guy I knew from high school we called Crazy Billy. He was the nicest guy sober, but was crazy when drinking. When he turned 21, he started drinking heavily. He bought a Tarot and moved into the woods and was not seen for several months. No one cared, including his psycho mom who had 30 to 40 cats running wild in their house. One day at another friend's party, he showed up out of nowhere with a girlfriend who lived with him in the tent. In less than 20 minutes, Crazy Bill started yelling at his girlfriend and was threatening to harm her. He kicked him out of the house immediately. He started pounding on the door rhythmically every 2 seconds, repeating in a monotonous tone, "Let me in. I won't hurt you." After a few minutes, the pounding turned into a fast flurry of fists in the door and suddenly stopped. A moment later, we heard a different type of screaming, which sounded more like a child in pain. Help, I just hurt myself. The stupid girlfriend then swung open the door and we witnessed Crazy Bill standing in the pool of red liquid. Apparently, he had stolen a large weapon earlier and had it in his trench coat. After being kicked out, he was pounding it on the door. There are still dents in the door from the handle. When he started pounding faster, he lost his grip on the weapon and it fell straight down. His girlfriend started babying him and he started apologizing. It was pathetic. When the cops came, they saw a pile of cigarette butts around him, which he had apparently attempted to use. Looks like quote-unquote crazy Bill needed some serious help. Story 17. It is impossible for me to cuddle in bed. I don't mind a little spooning before bed or after intimacy or on the couch while watching a movie, but when it comes time for me to sleep, it is impossible for me to fall asleep while being held. The only way I can sleep is on my belly without anyone touching me. Anyway, I had one boyfriend break up with me over this, and my current one has these temper tantrums some nights and yells, "You don't love me," and goes and sleeps on the couch and texts me how I don't love him or turns on the TV real loud and won't come back into bed until I tell him I love him. Seriously, I've never done anything this remotely freaking crazy. Just like the other person. Are you dating a 5-year-old? Story 18. Am I the only one posting as the crazy ex-guy? Anyway, I was in a relationship with a woman who had a kid. Loved them more than anything, but I drank a lot. I used to get jealous of everything she did that involved another guy. I checked her social media or phone a few times and even email. Nothing bad either. I think it was because of a huge lie she told me at the start of the relationship, which she had a good reason for. I just had stupid trust issues. We would fight a lot, I was scared and hurt her a lot, so I moved out and gave her the house and we'd try and sort things out by spending half the week together or whatever. So one night, I'm so intoxicated I fell asleep on the bus, woke up on the other side of town and walked home. We were meant to meet up early that night and go home together. Anyway, she didn't believe I just fell asleep and I couldn't remember what I had done, so when I got to the door and she wouldn't let me in, I started kicking it. When I got in, I ran up to check the bed as if there was going to be another dude there. Yep, I know, I'm a schmuck. Then I started to hurt her, until a neighbor started banging the wall, then I went through to his door. Anyway, this was a few days before Christmas, yet she still loved me, so it was forgiven, and I got to spend Christmas with the three of us. I went to the doctor's about the drink and stopped. I was crying for maybe a week after what I had done. We lasted another 6 months or so, and we broke up. We don't talk, and she's getting married. I'm glad she's happy. I think of them every day and try to stay away from relationships as I don't want to be a schmuck again. Maybe with no drink involved. Or you stop the pity party and work on yourself and make sure it never happens again. If you're enjoying the video, don't forget to hit that subscribe and like button for more videos like this. Story 19. Let's see. I didn't date this guy, but he attempted to date me. His attempt at pursuing me. Sitting next to me in the class we shared, he wrote poetry about me and about his intense feelings for me. Called me in the middle of the night, 3 a.m. Changed his class schedule to be the same as mine, changing his major in the process. Followed me out of every building on campus. Seriously, no matter where I went, there he was. Asked me personal and intimate questions about my physical relationship with my then boyfriend. Wrote me a 6-page essay about how he was trying to get over his crush on me, including the term furious. Story 20. I've had a few real winners. One was really interested in trying something new. I wasn't. He talked me into giving it a try, and it hurt so bad it made him stop and said never again. He got this idea in his head that it was only because I was too tense and I needed to relax and then I would enjoy it. So naturally, the best way to make that happen was to do it when I wasn't expecting it. Oops, wrong hole. Became pretty standard during intimacy. When I tried to break up with him, he had a total meltdown and I stayed with him purely out of fear that he would hurt himself, but started dating other people when I was traveling over the summer. I ended things when I got home and he was on better meds and could handle it. It got all our friends in the breakup. 2 had a real aversion to body hair, which makes me the very last girl he should date. He shaved his whole body, so he pretty much always felt like Velcro. After avoiding me for a couple of weeks, I finally cornered him and got him to say what was wrong, and he came up with, "Have you ever considered waxing this?" indicating his upper lip. He'd been avoiding me because he didn't know how to tell me that it had grossed him out the way my mustache tickled him when we kissed. I've made peace with my body hair situation, so I laughed and said maybe he was right. He was so offended because I laughed instead of being upset that he dumped me. Bro was expecting you to beg for him back. Story 21. He singled me out and sweet-talked me into getting together with him. He was an alcoholic who frequently drove while intoxicated and sometimes spiked, too. After I confronted him about his drinking, he completely changed the subject by out of the blue confessing his schizophrenic hallucinations and swearing me to secrecy. I found out from mutual acquaintances that he had been wildly promiscuous before we got together. I told him I was too young to sleep with him. He laughed at me and mistreated me months later. After I broke up with him, for several years he dated girls who suspiciously resembled me, even though he kept getting older. And it creeped me out to see how similar I was to those girls. We had or have a lot of the same taste in books, music, etc., and even had birthdays just a few days apart. Story 22. I dated a user for about a year and a half. Throughout that time, he'd pick me up from work while spiked, dated his ex on and off behind my back. He'd regularly call me incredibly messed up, asking me to walk to his house at 3 a.m. in the middle of January. He hit me a couple of times in front of friends. He was fired from our work from hitting me in the parking lot and then stole my car when he was removed from the property. While driving my car one night because I was intoxicated, he deliberately sideswiped some kid for not moving out of the way and broke my side view mirror. He jumped out of my car while it was moving once. He elbowed me in the side of the head once while I was driving because he'd gotten stung by a bee and thought I'd put out my cigarette on him. He threw a 3-foot apparatus on my head because he was in an argument over the phone with his other girlfriend. He routinely attempted to get me pregnant by sabotaging protections. I eventually moved out and got married. He still had my cell number at the time. My friends back home found out. I got a call from his other girlfriend saying he just harmed her because she was the reason I left. He then stole 2 of my tattoo designs and proceeded to get the same exact thing on himself. Thank God it didn't give birth to his baby. Thank God indeed. Story 23. I dated a guy I had known since kindergarten when I was 17. He had some daddy issues, among other things. When we were in Catholic school together, he went 8 years without having a single friend. It was considered fat, creepy, and ugly. I was also a bit of a nerd, and too chicken to stand up for him. We met again junior year, and he was a whole different guy. We became friends, and I fell for him instantly. I was pure, and he was, not. I think the bad stuff started when I decided to give it up to him. We would have intimacy, and he would tell me I sucked at it. He would yell at me for not doing things right. I had no say in the matter. I never changed places, and there was no after-intimacy cuddling. With that experience prior, I assumed this was normal. Then things got worse. He would belittle me in public and tell me to act like we were not dating when we were around people. He would put down my opinions and tell me I was unattractive and stupid. He would drink heavily a few times a week and come over to my house crying. It was weird because he was normally a tough guy, but give him some vodka and he would start telling me he was in love with me and overview his dramatic relationship with his dad. Once, he begged me not to go away to the college I'd gone into because he would miss me and needed me. I was stupid and young, and I ended up staying. I stayed, even after he asked another girl to prom while we were dating. His explanation? He said you didn't know if you wanted to go. Ultimately, he strung me along and dumped me while continuing to manipulate my feelings so that I would buy him things. I was the only one in the relationship that ever had a job. Turns out he was cheating on me with not only my best friend, but 5 other girls that I know of. He was telling them that I was a psycho and that I was forcing him to stay in the relationship. To this day, I've never been able to fully appreciate intimacy, and I always feel like I'm not good or sexy enough for my partner. Story 24. I had to share this story, even though it isn't mine. I had a friend, Kay, that went to church with this crazy guy. He was about 20 years older than her, and he began asking her out. She always declined, politely, because she wasn't interested. Suddenly, things took a turn for the bizarre. In church one Sunday, he stood up in front of the congregation and prophesied that God told him he would marry Kay in 6 weeks. He named a specific date and everything. Kay was extremely freaked out and told him it would never happen and that if he didn't retract what he said, she would get a restraining order. Didn't bother her again for a while, but 6 weeks later, he stood up in front of the congregation again and re-prophesied, saying that he would still marry Kay but that he had gotten the date wrong and provided a new God-mandated date. He began to stalk her steadily after this and told her that she was defying God's will by not marrying him. She finally succeeded in getting a restraining order on him. He didn't really leave her alone, but he did stop prophesying their pending nuptials. He eventually left the church after trying the same thing with another woman. Basically got kicked out by the church elders. Good riddance. Story 5. I had an ex who was into cross-dressing and asked me to help him pick out garments. Quite funny with him being quite overweight and hairier than a monkey, and he insisted on shaving everything, except his head and arms, in my bathroom, never cleaning up and keeping his huge ashtray of hair removal products in my bathroom so his roommates or friends wouldn't find out. It was pretty gross. Not really crazy, but ew, nonetheless. When he decided to use weapons in bed, along with way too rough acting and kept telling me how much I enjoyed it, that creeped me out enough to leave. Story 26. My last ex, being in the military, gave me a set list rules of how to handle my intimate life while he was gone. I could sleep with other girls, but I couldn't tell him, and I couldn't cheat on him. And if I ever find out you cheated on me, I'll freaking end you. For various reasons, after he came back from deployment, including him reading my texts or writing over my shoulder, demanding to know who I was texting, throwing a fit over the fact that I'd made friends with a male coworker while he was gone. And no, didn't sleep with said coworker. Came out that he was a raging racist. I broke it off with him. About a week after that, I told him I thought it was best we not even bother being friends, since we were obviously incompatible as human beings and not just a couple. He agreed. Didn't hear from him for 6 to 7 months, and out of the blue I got a random text from a number I didn't recognize. Figured out who he was due to the way he texted, and he started asking how he was doing. We should hook up sometime. If I really want, he could get his friend over for a triad. Told him the only way he was getting a triad was if it was with another man, preferably a black man. Oddly, I haven't heard from him since. Well, he didn't want to be outdone. What do you mean? Story 27. When I was younger, I started dating someone I met online. He was 18 and experiencing homelessness, living in his car. We'd only see each other if I gave him money for gas and food or if he needed to shower at my house. He'd say hurtful things and use very offensive words. He was manipulative and took advantage of me. The worst thing he ever did was injure me with a small, thin blade. I'm not even sure what it was. Then he pulled over on the side of the highway and left me there for half an hour without my phone or purse. He came back and apologized. I was still young and didn't know how to handle the situation. It was definitely my fault that I let it go on for 3 years. I tried to break up with him and he would threaten to harm himself, me, or my family, so I was really scared he might actually do those things. Maybe I'm the one who was wrong. When I went to college, we broke up for good. He still contacts me through social media, but I haven't seen him since. He was a very troubled individual. Story 28. My first boyfriend had an imaginary Johnson size problem, and he stressed a lot about it. Also, I couldn't finish no matter what, and he always blamed it on his size. One day while having intimacy with him and not enjoying it so much, he pulled away and asked me to take a good look at it and say truthfully if it is too small. So I kept staring at it for like 5 minutes, and the more I stared, the smaller it seemed. After quite a long while, I gathered my courage and blurted, "Yeah, it looks kinda small." Error. He made my life miserable for the rest of the time we dated. Should have doubled down on it and say it was microscopic. Story 29. During our relationship, he always did harmful stuff to me. Every time I tried to break up with him, he'd go crazy and threaten to end it all, so I'd give in. When I finally gathered up the courage to dump the freaking psycho, he tried to end himself in my bathroom. I called the cops. He locked the door, so I picked the lock and dragged him out. He jumped up and hurt me in the shoulder and grabbed me by the hair. Got away from him and opened the front door for the cops, who wrapped his arms with my towels and dragged him out of there. It was actually bizarre to watch. Him being 5'10" and like 120 pounds, actually managing to fight off 2 big, strong cops. As an aside, when the cops showed up, they thought that I was the one who was attempting to end it all because I had so much mess on me. Anyway, they offered to call victim services to help clean up, but I declined. Spent the next few hours picking up broken glass and cleaning my bathroom or living room carpet. It wasn't until I was done that I realized I still had his mess on my face and all in my hair. For about a year afterwards, he'd call or email or IM, etc. me from random numbers and accounts, so I didn't know it was him, telling me about his latest attempt. He tried about 6 times that I know about. He would send me photos of buckets filled with his mess. For one of the attempts, he rented a freaking helium tank from a party supply store, stuck in a plastic bag with a nozzle inside, and turned it on. All 6 attempts failed? Sounds like a skill issue. Story 30. I dated my ex for almost 3 years. I ended the relationship because neither of us were happy. The guy was not cruel or anything like that. We just weren't happy. We fought a lot, verbally, and I just had enough. Of course, after breaking up with him, I found out he was psychotic. He started stalking me, sending me creepy phone calls describing what I wore to bed the night before. He went through all of my old journals and wrote that I was a lying witch over every page in ink. I ended up throwing all of them away. It disturbed me so much. He followed me, and a date I had to blockbuster and hurt my poor date in the back of the head. Police were called. The best part? I found out he had been lying to me the entire time we were dating. Not about big things, little things, things that were simply no reason to lie about. He said he was born in Ireland, lived there till he was 5 and moved to the States. In reality, he had lived in South Carolina his entire life. He said his dad passed away when he was 9, his dad passed away when he was 14, etc., etc. All of this came out after I dumped him, which just makes me glad I dumped him when I did. Story 31. I've been dating a guy, X, for almost a year, and he decided to move across the country to get his music career started. As we'd been talking about marriage, I was pretty upset about it, but I had 3 months to prepare myself. X moves, I start seeing someone else. X then begins sending me things in the mail. CDs of bands I love, etc. We're still on good terms and talk every so often. 2 months later, he moved back. I run into him at a concert with my new boyfriend, and X calls me after the show, screaming expletives at me and telling me what a schmuck new boy is. So I pretty much told him to shove it. He sends me a present for my birthday with the letters cut out of magazines, but with a message that I know would only be from him. I do not respond. Fast forward 2 years, now single again. He finds me. We go out for a beer, laugh about how much dating me apparently screwed with his head, have a little too much to drink, pass out on his couch. I wake up to a flash going off, but several instincts kick in so I don't move a muscle. Yeah, dude was taking pictures of me while I was asleep. I leave and confront him the next day via email and tell him not to contact me again. Ban him on everything possible, and he still finds a way to send me a message, apologizing and blaming the alcohol. Yeah, there may be a restraining order in my future. Story 32. It was my first year in college. He wore a Minotaur cologne, most amazing blue eyes, and just absolutely gorgeous. We started chatting, and he seemed absolutely normal. I was incredibly attracted to him, so before you know it, we were kind of kissing by the lockers in between classes. Then things started getting a little weird. He's a Wiccan. That's cool, that's fine. I'm now an atheist and couldn't care less, but back then I was still shedding some Christian beliefs, so it felt a little daring. So sure, why not? He said he believes in reincarnation. Okay, a little strange, but I wasn't going to marry the guy. A couple more days of hotness would be okay. In fact, this was his 32nd reincarnation. He wanted to be a history teacher. Figured he would be really great at it since he lived through it all personally. Yeah, I started backing off at this point. Unfortunately, that's when he got persistent. Lured me into his car, locked the doors, and said he was going to cast a spell on me. I call BS, but in my mind, frantically trying to find a way to get out of the situation. Every time I tried to unlock the doors, he'd lock them again. I finally said if he didn't let me out of the car, I would go straight to the police. Fortunately, he backed off and let me go. I had a couple of my other male friends go up to him and tell him if they saw him again within 50 feet of me, they would hurt him. The best part is, it never occurred to me until years later that his name was completely fake. Yes, I actually believed his name was Christian Calendar, with that spelling. So glad I'm not so naive anymore, but I do wonder whatever happened to him. I don't. Story 33. The first guy I ever slept with was perfectly normal, until he asked me to marry him. I was 17 and had this insane notion that marrying the first guy you sleep with is romantic despite the fact that I wasn't in love with him. I just thought he was a nice guy who kissed good and was clean. Anyway, fast forward a bit to me having a promise ring, and suddenly he became this insane, jealous schmuck. My guy friends couldn't hug me. He would show up at my school. I was a senior in high school and he was 20, to walk to my next class to make sure other guys weren't looking or talking to me. The final straw was when he showed up at my friend's house, red-faced with anger at me for not telling him I was going out. I basically told him to shove his jealous act up his bum. Gave him back his ring and didn't answer any phone calls or messages for months. He finally agreed to meet me at a local coffee place and explained to him what was going on. Apparently, he thought he was being chivalrous. I told him he was being a jealous schmuck and that obviously this wasn't going to work if he couldn't trust me. We tried again a few years later, but he was still a control freak. Last I heard, he's married to an ex-girlfriend who cheated on him. Has a kid with her and also has 2 other kids from 2 other women. I think I dodged a bullet with this one. Yeah, not as crazy as other stories, but I tend to go for real chill guys. Story 34. So there's this boy I really wanted to date. He was really short, really small in general, had some health problems growing up, which led to some crazy insecurities and mental issues. I wanted to date him, and after spending the night at my place one night, not intimacy, just cuddling, it was high school, I asked him if he wanted to be exclusive. When he said no, I backed off, even as friends, giving myself some room so we could be cool later. He freaked out and called me like every day. After a few months where I would see him and talk to him sporadically, I invited him up to my college to just hang out. I warned him in advance that my new boyfriend would be there. After meeting him, he proceeded to run outside, sobbing. I couldn't find him and was horrified, so I just waited inside. Eventually, he called, saying he needed to get back in and that he tried to sleep outside on a bench without a jacket, but it was too cold. November in Baltimore. This is like 2 hours later. He's still sobbing. He proceeded to flop face down on my bed and sob all night while I slept in my roommate's bed directly next to him. The next day, he wrote ridiculous aim-away messages about how his life was ruined. Also, he wrote me a note on my desktop where he detailed his attempts to sleep on the bench outside. We haven't spoken since. Story 35. After moving to the same city as him to go to school, he created a fake person who phoned me and threatened me. This resulted in me running to him since he was the only person I knew since it was my first few weeks of university in a new city. When I figured out it was him, he denied it. And we broke up, but he stalked me, broke into my Facebook and my sister's, my emails account, and even sent himself an email from me saying I wanted to get back together with him so his parents didn't think it was crazy. He did all sorts of crazy things and then attempted to end it all. Thankfully, he was unsuccessful, but his parents denied that there was anything wrong with him at the time. He continued to stalk and pester me for months. Thankfully, now I'm 100% more appreciative of everything my wonderful boyfriend does for me. Well, if you like these stories, here's more. YouTube thinks you're going to love this. Catch you in that video.